105.7 FM in Cape Town.
The Northwest Legislature's Portfolio Committee on Economic Development, Environment, Tourism, Agriculture and Rural Development will embark on public hearings throughout the province on the Plant Health Fight of Sanitary Bill B14B21 on 25 April 2024 at Ngakamudiri Mulema District in Motswedi Community Hall in Motswedi, at Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District in Agricultural College in Potchefstroom, at Dr. Ruth Somotsi Mompati in Tosca Community Hall in Tosca, at Bojanala District in Safer Scale Community Hall in Safer Scale. All hearings start at 10.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
I've been putting my mind to this one, okay? How do you make a cause-linked public holiday less popular? Have it as a public holiday. What do I mean by that? Let me break it down. You have public holidays that are linked to, religious public holidays like Christmas and the Easter holidays and even New Year's Day, for example. Leave that alone. That's fine. Then you have the others that are cause-related. I'm thinking about Freedom Day coming up shortly, Workers' Day, Human Rights Day, and Day of Reconciliation, and so on, okay? Now, here's the thing. We know why we celebrate or commemorate them. We know that, okay? But when it's a non-working day, inevitably, the vast majority of the people in the country tend to use it as a day of rest, complete rest, or they go shopping, or they have a braai. They basically chill out and switch off, okay? And I'm going to therefore argue differently. And of course, then you get the political parties who commemorate those days, and they do use it very often to push their narrow political agenda. So, what am I saying? I'm suggesting, the unpopular suggestion, that when these cause-linked public holidays occur, in fact, they should be normal working days. So just think about it. Human Rights Day, a normal working day. Freedom Day, normal working day. I know this one's a Saturday, but on a normal working day, ordinarily. Workers' Day, Youth Day, Women's Day, so on. And then what should happen because it's a working day, in the working environment, management and the teams that form part of that business unit, they carry on their normal working duties, but at the same time, a lot of what they do then would be linked to that cause. In my opinion, that would ensure greater awareness, greater acceptance of the cause. I mean, think about young people. Let's look at Youth Day in particular, okay? Youth Day is a holiday for young people. Can you imagine young people in school commemorating Youth Day in school? Look at the level of awareness, the level of consciousness that would take place when they in school, in their classrooms, versus what happens now for the majority, which is like it's a complete chill out. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the current situation of a cause-linked public holiday effectively normalizes that cause. And what should happen, it should be the other way around. It should always be a day of heightened consciousness. And the best place to ensure that consciousness is heightened is to actually commemorate it and to create the consciousness in the normal workplace. So if I'm on air, that's where I should be on air on that particular day. Well, you think about it and you tell me what you make of it. I'm Ashraf Garda. That's my point. Now, what's your point?
Ashraf Garda on SAFM. SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation. Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
And let me make it clear, I certainly love public holidays, just so you know that, right? Well, my name is Ashraf Garda. This is the National Pulse. And yes, in many ways, public holidays reflect very much the national pulse at that time. So tell me what you make of it. Tell me what you make of what I just said about conscientizing, even more so by having a working public holiday, if I can call it that, okay? Your opinion certainly matters. You can voice note in text or voice note form via WhatsApp, 0614 104 107, 0614 104 107. You have that right. Or you can also call into 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032. You also know that we are on all social media platforms, in particular driven on the X Twitter platform, as well as on Facebook. So find us there, SFM Radio. You can find me too, Ashraf Garda. When you're commenting, do use the hashtag The National Pulse, because again, it's just a sense of consciousness about exactly the space that we're in for the next 3 hours. And I can tell you now, for the next 3 hours, we are going to be in a big space. There's so much we have to talk about, so much we have to cover, including a move for those refugees who are in the UK to be sent to Rwanda, for that entire process to be stopped. There's this global move around that we're going to certainly touch on. And then, you may have heard about it earlier on, the NPA, and they have lots to say in terms of their media briefing. We must cover that, including what I understand would be a get out of jail card free for those big businesses who ordinarily would have their business leadership in jail, maybe, but if they got the money, well, think differently. So we'll talk about that too. But what we're going to pick up first up is the issue of affirmative action, which is not new. I mean, affirmative action is 1994, so like 30 years old, isn't it? Or thereabouts. Now, AfriForum, they've had many things to say around the issue of affirmative action, but they've taken their thoughts, or could I say their opposition to it, a step further. They've submitted comments to the Department of Employment and Labour regarding draft regulations on proposed sectoral numerical race targets. So what does that really mean? At the centre of it, AfriForum argues that racially discriminating legislation should be scrapped by the government. Well, in general, and in all facets of society, looking at sport, education, employment, basically everything. So let's try and understand what they've done this time around and the implications thereof with the AfriForum's Head of Public Relations, Ernst van Zyl. Ernst, appreciate your time, and you're now connected to the National Pulse.
Good afternoon. I think this is an important topic, so thank you for the opportunity.
Right. So what have you done? What's the bottom line to what has been sent and submitted to the Department of Labour?
Right. So this is a comment opportunity. There's many of these types of opportunities when it comes to draft regulations. And this was once again one of those opportunities where the public is invited, and this is organizations or individuals, to submit comments to the department regarding specific legislation or policies. And in this case, it is the numerical race targets. And this is for the Department of Employment and Labour. So AfriForum, as an organization that takes a strong stance against racially discriminatory policies, is in a firm position to utilize these types of opportunities to be part of the debate and part of the discussion. And that's what we did by submitting our comments today to the department.
And I understand the deadline for the comments is May 2nd. So the submission to comments goes to the Department of Labour. Is that part of an exercise from their side where they rethinking the process? I mean, who's driving this process?
So this is from the side of the Department of Employment and Labour. With most draft regulations and bills, there's usually this type of opportunity for comment from the public. So this is from their side, opening the opportunity for comments from the public to give their inputs regarding specific draft regulations, what form it should take, submitting maybe even potentially criticisms. This is an opportunity for people to voice their opinion on policy direction and the future of legislation.
Okay, now you and I can talk about this issue for an hour, and you know that, right? We have to shrink it into 5 minutes, right? What is your understanding of the current affirmative action policy and implementation, and what in your submission have you proposed differently?
Right. So South Africa has had racially discriminatory policies for decades now. You put that in the introduction correctly to this segment, and these sectoral targets, where there's racial targets for employment sectors, is just another symptom of it, or a version of it. And in this regard, this is pretty much just an example of racial bean counting, where a sector has to hire a certain amount of every every race to be demographically representative. But as you said earlier correctly, this is not something new. This has been going on for decades in South Africa, and these types of policies might have names that sound very noble and named like affirmative action or redress, but they are not achieving what they set out to achieve. They pretty much just create a small elite that benefit from these types of policies, basically cronyism, and the people that suffer in the end are the vast majority of people that are left out of, that are not part of this exclusive club. And at the same time, it also completely harms South Africa's credentials as calling itself a non-racial society or a non-racial country, seeing as you can't call yourself a non-racial society if you have this type of racially discriminatory policies. One of the examples, maybe just to, again, as you said, to unpack it for the audience, is where we heard from Dis-Chem a few years ago, where they said they're putting a moratorium on the hiring or promotion of white South Africans. And that's just an example of the unjustifiable outcomes that sprout from these types of racially discriminatory policies. And AfriForum says it's high time that these policies are given a deadline, where after that deadline is reached, they are phased out.
Okay, let me ask you this. I mean, first of all, in terms of you quoting the introduction, I certainly didn't necessarily say that I agree that the policies are racially discriminatory. In fact, I quoted AfriForum's position, which is what you believe, right? But you've explained why. My question then is, you call it racial discrimination. Many people, and certainly people with strong human rights policies and activism, they call this a leveling off of discrimination, which took place before. And if it's 30 years and beyond, it's really because it's taken that long to try and achieve a leveling off. I mean, does that not make sense to you?
I think what we are dealing with here is the question of means versus ends. So on the one side, people can say, well, this is what these policies are trying to achieve. That is the ends. But on the other side, there is, what are these policies, the means? What means are going to be used to achieve these ends or to achieve these objectives? Now, the objectives may be described as affirmative action or redress of the past, but the means, what is being used to get to these outcomes is racial discrimination. Now, there is a debate regarding whether this is justifiable or not. AfriForum says it's not justifiable, but at the end of the day, the means being used and employed here are policies that mandate racial discrimination. As I said earlier, we see so many examples of this manifesting in our society, where the South African political and social environment has become very race obsessed. We are not moving towards a non-racial society.
But you say we've become
stuck in a racial mindset.
Well, you say we become race obsessed. I mean, of course, I'm going to argue with you differently. In fact, we've been race obsessed since the implementation of apartheid and even the period before that. So, all I'm trying to understand is we are the children, you and I, of a race obsessed society that has been race obsessed for a very long time, long before the current ruling or governing party, isn't it?
Yes. And that's why I took the position in our press statement that South Africa has been a racially discriminatory society for over 100 years now. But a lot of people deny the fact that we have continued to remain a race-obsessed society into the 21st century, and that is thanks to this type of racially discriminatory policies.
All right.
Being
So
pursued by the government.
in your submission, do you agree that because of race-obsessed policies for a long time, we actually have this very, very unequal society which primarily is premised on race lines? It's the fault lines are very obvious, right? Do you agree with that, firstly?
Well, South Africa struggles with a myriad of problems. I mean, crime, unemployment. There's so many problems that touch every South African almost on a daily basis. But the question is, how do you address these issues? And the way that you address them...
No, but before that, I just sorry to interject. I just want to get clarity on your understanding, okay? Because you have a case, and I want to hear what your case is. I'm saying to you, do you agree that in terms of this discriminatory policy that existed for a long time, the fault lines, therefore, of South Africa is largely based upon race, primarily because of what happened before, and that's why the need to redress?
Well, when it comes to the legacy of the past, I think it would be naive to say that there is no legacy left of past policies in South Africa from the previous regime. But the critical question then comes in, where does the legacy of the new South Africa or the new government of South Africa come in? And I think after 30 years, there's a very strong case to be made that there is already a very strong legacy, a legacy of failure in many regards of the new government of South Africa under the leadership of the ANC. And that's one of the core arguments in AfriForum's comments is that without a fixed date for racially discriminatory legislation to be brought to an end, the vicious cycle of government failure and the push for more racially discriminatory policies continues.
Is your issue, understandable, I hear what you're saying around affirmative action, is that premised largely on the legacy of the failure of the ruling party, as in terms of their implementation that's wrong, or is the principle wrong? What I'm suggesting, therefore, is that, the principle could still be correct, what it was 30 years ago and now, of redress, but the ANC as the ruling party, and I think with due respect to them, because there's many examples of that, they've implemented so many policies incorrectly, and we find these problems. So isn't this an ANC problem, but actually not an affirmative action and equality problem?
Well, there you're touching on the very crux, the very core of the debate, and it's very simple. The stance from AfriForum's side is that a government mandates or pressure on businesses or any place of employment to use racially discriminatory policies when it comes to employment was wrong in the past, but because it was wrong in the past, it's also principally wrong in the present, and that's why AfriForum opposes it in the present, as we do oppose it. The use of racially discriminatory employment policies in the past.
All right. What then is your solution? I mean, what's your workable solution for a person listening? And there could be white people affected by these policies, and there are black people affected by these policies. Listening, and maybe you're stating a good case, but they want a workable solution where there is redress, but maybe not as defined as the ruling party has defined it. So what's your solution in your submission?
Absolutely. So I think at the root of the solution is to fix the dysfunctional education system of South Africa, the education system that has been dysfunctional now for so many decades on end. What it is producing is, in the end, the horrific unemployment crisis that we find ourselves in. And I think at the very core of it is the approach of the education system. So the South African education system currently is focused on creating job seekers, while there should be a change in perspective that our education system should be producing job creators. I went to a public school in South Africa, and my entire experience of education was that I am being educated to become a job seeker, not to become a job creator. But there's so many other angles that can also be taken to actually make a big difference in our education sector. One of them also is to tackle problems where we still in 2024 have thousands of students, I don't know exactly the statistics of students that go to schools that still use pit toilets, that don't even have basic infrastructure.
Fair point.
These things need to be fixed.
Let me wrap this up. We got 30 seconds to wrap up here. Here's the thing, right? If we hear what you're saying and about maybe rethinking the entire education system, in fact, I think everybody would raise their hands and agree with you on that point there. But as you would think about a rugby or a football team, that can take 12, 15 years before you actually produce the type of match winner that we need in the country. So that may be the long-term vision. I certainly pray there's a rethink around education. But in the short term right now, can we not concede that there's still vast gulfs between the haves and the haves not, and they are premised upon color, and therefore you need to have the long-term fix of a rethink. But in rugby terms or football terms, you need to get a star player in quickly to change things, and that person must reflect what's needed in that team. So in this case here, what do we do about black players right now? In this case, black players. So we're talking about black people who are on the outside, and they can't wait another 15 years or so.
Well, you're completely correct when it comes to the fact that this is a long-term fix for a complex problem. But the best day to have started this approach was 30 years ago. Then it was 20 years ago. Then it was 10 years ago. Well, we have to start at some point in regards to changing the trajectory of, for example, fixing our education system. Should have happened 30 years ago. Would have also been good to happen 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. But we're at the point where we have to start at some point, and we have to start now. now so that in 10 years or 20 years, we're not still having the same conversation. As I said.
And that's where we're going to have to leave it there. Ernst, we're going to have to leave it there. My apology for that. Time has run out.
No problem.
Ernst van Zyl, in fact, time may run out. Does that run out in terms of the entire country's problems? Another question to think about as we head to Freedom Day on Saturday. Ernst van Zyl is the head of public relations at AfriForum. What do you make of what we just spoke about? Tell me. You can WhatsApp right away. 086 000 2032 is to call in, and WhatsApp 0614 104 107, voice or text. We talk refugees in a moment.
So, a lady from Air Officini just turned 55, and although I'm still a spring chicken, there's a part of me that envies her, especially since she now qualifies for a Nedbank Electronic Optimum Plus account with capital guaranteed. Talk about FOMI, huh, voice man?
If you mean FOMO, then definitely boss man. And she can earn up to 12.6% interest. Anyone over 55 can open theirs via the Nedbank Money app in less than 2 minutes. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
The Northwest Legislature's Portfolio Committee on Economic Development, Environment, Tourism, Agriculture and Rural Development will embark on public hearings throughout the province on the Electricity Regulation Bill B23B23 on 24 April 2024 at Ngaka Mudiri Mulaema District in Madibuho Community Hall in Madibuho, at Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District in Matlosani Auditorium Hall, at Dr. Ruth Somuti Mompati in Utlwanang Community Hall in Christiana, at Bojanala District in Letabile Community Hall in Letabile. All hearings start at 10.
Character will be tested between the great giants of the beautiful game. RB Leipzig and Borussia Dortmund understand that the first prize is unreachable. However, they want to finish as high as possible. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch RB Leipzig versus Borussia Dortmund on Saturday, 27 April at 3 p.m. Live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Right, let's pick out some of your voice notes. In fact, even text messages. Here's a question. Ask him, Ashraf, to define job creator system. Very glib, I think, comes from Rohan, right? And let's see, in fact, there's a couple of more voice notes, if we can play them, that I want to just pick up on, because I think they really should get you thinking.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. This is Anonymous. Don't be surprised by the move of UK government to send immigrants to Rwanda. Rwanda is a puppet of the West. Paul Kagame is the puppet. Whatever is happening in Rwanda is controlled by the West. As you can see, the biggest refinery mine in the world is in Rwanda, yet there's no single gold mine in Rwanda. They are stealing minerals from the DRC. Even the VW from Germany, all the batteries for their vehicle, they are manufactured in Rwanda, including a majority of the vehicles. Then Rwanda is the puppet of the West.
Okay, Rwanda is the puppet of the West. I'm sure others will have strong views on that, as there's another view on BE.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Hope you're well. I think the problem with this whole BE story 30 years after democracy is if you have two people, one black, one white, coming from the same type of background, poor people, and they go and study at varsity. They both get NSFAS funding and everything. The one qualifies as an engineer and the other one qualifies as a chartered accountant. Now, irrelevant of what industry they're in, does the white person have to comply with BEE criteria even though he comes from a poor and impoverished background, just because he's white? And the black person who comes from a poor, impoverished background doesn't have to comply with anything because he's black. I think that's the unfairness that you need to be looking at from this race thing and everything like that. The future going forward.
I think the question is, if that's unfair, then what implemented is fair? It's a big, big question that we all grapple with. Let's get the news headlines now. It's 3:30. Here's Eva Chipa.
Thanks, Ashraf. Top stories for this hour. A man who used Facebook to lure women and rape them has been found guilty at the High Court in Thohoyandou in Limpopo. 34-year-old self-proclaimed prophet Mokove Makavo lured women through Facebook under the pretext of being a prophet. In other news, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batoyi, says there have been significant changes, including stabilizing the leadership of the NPA since 2021. And lastly, the IFP says it's not completely closing the door to discussions on forming coalition governments with the ANC after the May 29th general elections. IFP leader Velnkosini Hlabisa was speaking at the sidelines of a multi-party charter media briefing outlining the 11 parties' plan on social relief for households living in poverty. I'll be back at 4 with more news. For SFM News, I'm Eva Chipa.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the R21 will have full closure of the highway between Nelma Pierce Drive and Olifantsfontein Road on Saturday from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. and Sunday from 6 a.m. until 12 noon. In KZN on the N2 southbound, that's queuing towards Spaghetti Junction. In the Eastern Cape, the N2 eastbound is where truck rushes reported at Cotswold. The road has been closed off to road users. And the R61 is protesting reported between Tata and Port St. John's in the vicinity of Tombo. In Cape Town, the M3 southbound is slow moving towards Rhodes Drive. Leesbeek Parkway is queuing in the Observatory area and Turfield Road is slow moving through Hanover Park. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Duming Kapele.
I'm just thinking this morning that, in a given 24-hour period, it's incredible how much sport, big stories change all the time. So I have no idea what you're going to start with. Go ahead.
A very good afternoon to you. Starting off with sad news. I don't know if you remember the Transnet SAFA School of Excellence. So basically, it's a school that identifies young football players from rural and underprivileged communities, and they prepare them for a professional career in football. It has produced the likes of Stephen Pienaar, Bernard Parker, and Dan Clayt, amongst others. Well, the school's financial difficulties have now gone from bad to worse after electricity was cut off yesterday, leaving 75 boys at the school in the dark and showering with cold water. The school is reportedly owing a municipal bill of around 1.3 billion rand, and it has been in financial trouble since Transnet announced back in December 2022 that it was leaving the school due to financial constraint. It was contributing around 20 million rand annually. And now with news developing, the staff now have decided to down tools, and they've even gone to Transnet offices to meet with the CEO to talk about the future of the school. And the last time I remember, Gauteng Premier Bayazile Sufi had said that they're working on plans to revive the school. He's been saying this for a while, and I know he said this last month because he said it at the launch of the City to City Marathon, but we'll definitely keep you up to date with the story as it develops. Elsewhere, Chelsea manager Mauricio Pochettino has refused to blame his players. This is after their 5-0 loss to Arsenal yesterday. The Blues have now conceded the most goals in the Premier League history. They're sitting on 57 goals conceded so far, and they still have 6 more games to play. And Pochettino says that the circumstances are much more bigger than the performances of the players.
I think we cannot blame the players. I'm not going to blame the players. Are the circumstances that are bigger than the performance of the player? I think we cannot blame young guys that came here and after suffering some circumstance, the team, you need to come here and to fight against a team that is preparing to win the Premier League. That is why, be careful. We cannot, be unfair with our player. It's true that we are disappointed with the performance, but I'm not going to use a word that is not fair to describe, our team, our player, our squad.
Well, they're sitting 9th on the log, and we'll get to see if they'll improve as time goes on. In rugby, Lions centre Hanko van Wyk will have to wait to make his Springbok debut as his season has come to a premature end, and this is due to a knee injury. He suffered the injury after coming off the bench for the Lions in the bonus point victory over Leinster at Ellis Park on Saturday. The 22-year-old was making his return from a knee injury suffered against the Sharks in the first weekend of March, which kept him out of action suspension for 6 weeks. And now here's another injury, and he was forced to undergo an operation and is expected to be sidelined for 5 months, ending his participation in the current URC campaign, also delaying his Springbok call-up. In tennis, Daniil Medvedev believes that the addition of Gail Simon to his coaching team can help him understand clay way better, as the world number 4 looks to build confidence in his least favorite surface. This is ahead of the French Open starting next month. Medvedev has won 19 of his 20 titles on hard court, with a grass court crown that same year at the Mallorca Open, and he won his lone clay court trophy at the 2023 Rome Masters in the lead up to Roland Garros. Rounding things up with women in sports, Aitana Bonmati was crowned World Sportswoman of the Year, and that was at the Laureus Awards, making her the first footballer to win the Women's Award at the Laureus ceremony. She plays for Barcelona and Spain, and if you didn't know that name, now you know.
I know Marta.
Mm-hmm.
The Brazilian, right?
Yeah.
She's Messi and she's Ronaldo in one. That's what I know. But okay, I'll have to find out about this name.
It's Aitana Bonmati, worth knowing. And recently, Pep actually said that if she becomes the Barcelona sporting director, he might just ponder on going back there as the manager. With that said, it's a wrap from my side. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumin Kapele.
Attention to all music lovers. The highly anticipated Metro FM Music Awards are finally here.
Yo, y'all ready?
Purchase your tickets to gain access to the awards ceremony and the live concert happening on the 27th of April 2024 at Mbombela Stadium, Mpumalanga.
Yo, we about to have some fun in here.
You can now secure your tickets from 300 Rand at www.computicket.co.za.
Yeah, man, this is a big night.
With a star-studded lineup of DJs and live performances, don't miss your chance to be part of this unforgettable celebration of talent and music excellence.
Come on, Mbombela, come through. Let's do this.
Hashtag MMA24, Black to the Future. Metro FM, it's where you want to be.
Be part of the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards under the theme Celebrating 30 Years of Freedom Through Sporting Excellence, with great prizes to be won every week. All you have to do is SMS A, B, C, D, or E to 32020 to vote for your favorite People's Choice Nominee of the Year. SMS is charged at R1.50. Free SMSs do not apply. The nominees are A. Irban Etzebeth, B. Garda Steyn, C. Siamtanda Siya Kolisi, D. Percy Tau, E. Kirsten Neuschafer. SMS A, B, C, D, or E to 32020. Voting line closes at 9 p.m. on the 5th of May 2024. T's and C's apply. For more information, visit dsac.gov.za. Catch the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5th of May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 8 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag Isinja Zagay. Hashtag SASA 17th edition.
I want to talk to this girl, but I'm shy, bro. Come on, go talk to her, bro. It's a masquerade party. Plus, the ladies love a man with a bit of mystery. Don't worry, we got you. Hey, girl.
I just want to know who's behind that mess. From the moment I saw you, you stole my heart. Can I please get your number, babe? And I'll take you out. I promise to love you forever when this I vow.
I'll show you my face if you show me yours.
Let's face it, when you channel your inner superstar, every moment turns into a musical. Catch The Masked Singer SA, Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. and see who's hiding behind the mask. Channel A Better You with S3. S3, open up.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
So many comments about AfriForum and affirmative action. Here's Bongani from Durban saying the AfriForum Van Zyl representative talked and data for affirmative action policy. However, he does not have an alternative solution to address the damage done by the apartheid regime policies. You're saying a lot more. I can't read them all because it's a bit too long, but I get the point that you make, right? And there's another couple more around affirmative action and BEE as well. So put that on pause. We'll pick it up. I'll take your calls on that issue as well. Let's now talk about refugees. You may be aware that refugees who had to flee different countries for many reasons, mainly and seek asylum, well, the UK were very kind enough to allow them the space on that island. But now the plan is to effectively repatriate these asylum seekers or shift them right from the UK to another safe haven, in inverted commas, called Rwanda on the African continent. So that's been the plan for quite a while now. But as the date for that to happen is now imminent, there's been growing opposition to that. So Filippo Grandi, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, are calling on the UK government to reconsider its plan to transfer these asylum seekers to Rwanda, and rather, they believe practical steps needs to be taken to address these inflows of refugees and migrants. Okay, let's find out more about it, certainly from a perspective here in South Africa, with Dr. Vusimuzi Sibanda, the chairperson of the African Diaspora Global Network. Dr. Sibanda, good chatting to you, and you're now on the National Pulse. Hi. Dr. Sibanda, do we have you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, you're on the National Pulse. I certainly can. Thanks for joining us. You're on the National Pulse, right? What do you make of this move? I mean, is there sympathy with the UK for first welcoming the asylum seekers and then sympathy for getting them to be pushed to Rwanda? Or am I using the wrong words there?
Well, you're not using the wrong word. I mean, you must realize that because the asylum seekers had arrived, in the UK, and the UK has been obviously, getting, the grips of, this right-wing, language and practice, where basically, asylum seekers, now are seen as a scourge and a problem. And we've seen this rhetoric growing, especially in the last decade. And now, unfortunately, you are using the right word, that they are being pushed. Because if you look at what the UN is actually saying, you look at a country, because when people go to a country, it also means that it has got to be a choice where they want to land into, because they know and believe that their rights are going to be properly protected. You cannot be fleeing from a country where your rights are being violated, and you're being thrown into a country which does not have a record of human rights, observance and defense. And that can never be said of Rwanda. What we know about Rwanda, for starters, is that, we've had a leader that's been at the helm of that country for so many decades, and we know that there's been issues about, the terms being renewed and all that. So starting from that on its own, that tells you a lot about the repression of freedom of speech and democracy in that country. So people are being pushed from the UK. That is the correct.
So who are these refugees, and what led to them seeking asylum in the UK in the first place?
Well, look, there's a lot of asylum seekers that are coming from Africa, some from Asia, and you will agree with me that, for example, countries in the Middle East and, countries like Pakistan in Asia, they have got a lot of, they are not settled. I mean, if you look at the Kashmir and all that. And then when you come into Africa, I mean, it goes without saying, I mean, we've got a lot that is happening in a lot of these African countries, right from down, from Southern Africa up to the North Africa there. There is a lot of issues that are taking place and people being victimized, because the bulk of our governments in Africa, work on victimizing people that they ordinarily don't agree with them or criticize how they're doing things. So these people now that already know and, would want to have some form of protection are now being, sent away to a country that is only going to benefit in terms of the funds that the UK is actually willing, to channel because they are in good books, not necessarily because these rights are going to go there.
So here's the issue. What then, having accepted these refugees, what is the premise or the motivation for the UK to now push them to Rwanda? Point one. Point two. What is the great appeal for the Rwandans to actually accept these refugees? I mean, is there a red herring here? Is there an incentive for them to open up their country to this influx of refugees when they were not their refugees in the first instance?
Well, look, I mean, I think that is the very important thing that we need to look at, that now we are now looking at the motivation, that the reason. The UK is doing that because it doesn't want to deal, with the asylum seekers, because now it has got an opinion which is negative, against, asylum seekers, instead of, because it has got the money that it is giving over to Rwanda to say, okay, let them be dealt with Rwanda. Why send them to another country when you can deal with them? Who has said, Rwanda has got that adequate space in terms of, the international, position as far as the UN is concerned? Has the UN made the recommendation that Rwanda has been seen as one of the countries that has got a good reception for asylum seekers? And that is not the position. And Rwanda, of course, in its pro-development agenda, where it's seen as developing, remember, there are so many houses that are now going to be that have already been constructed in Rwanda, which makes the Rwandan government to be happy because that infrastructure now is going to belong, to Rwanda. And so much money that also had been paid over to Rwanda, millions in fact. And that is an incentive for Rwanda to say, let's get the money. How we use it, how much we real channel to these asylum seekers, no one is going to come and mark the register and say, okay, we have real paid this much and this is what we've done. So that's where the problem is.
So at the core, it's a business transaction. In effect.
It is indeed a business transaction.
Okay. Now, there's been opposition to it, right? I quoted the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and a few others around human rights as well, now calling for an end to that. I believe that this move of these refugees is imminent, but the fact that there's been opposition now, is that likely to be reversed, or you think it'll simply be, someone standing on a soapbox at Hyde Park and nobody listening?
I still believe that there's a great likelihood that before that happens, because we know that in the UK itself, a lot of people, remember, it has been challenged in court, and this is just Parliament, coming up and, changing things here and there, or Cabinet. But I'm still very positive that we are going to see this again back in court, and that something is likely to stop it even, during, at the 11th hour. And the UN now has actually come up, and that statement, from the UN is very, very important, because it becomes a premise and basis for anyone who wants to attack that decision. You say, well, look, this is the United Nations, the ones that are in charge of asylum seekers and refugees. They understand better and a better place about which country is, a better destination for refugees and asylum seekers. And that place is definitely not Rwanda. So we're likely to see that back in court, and there is a good chance that UK might not succeed in proceeding with that. It might be interdicted even when the plane is about to take off.
And let's leave it at that. That story certainly, I think, has lots of legs to run, if I can use those words, or firepower, I suppose, right? Dr. Vusimuzi Sibanda, the chairperson of the African Diaspora Global Network. In fact, we'll have a podcast of that interview, as well as the previous one around affirmative action from AfriForum as well. Just check it out right now. In fact, we've just tweeted it via SFM Radio on our X platform. We'll chat about Amnesty International and South Africa's freedom after this.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. We buy cars, we buy cars.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
The highly anticipated Metro FM Music Awards are finally here, and the live concert happening with a star-studded lineup of DJs and live performances.
Make some beautiful noise!
On the lineup, Oscar Mbo, Oskido, Dala Tuxin, Makadzi, Lamise Hallworthy, Mtunzi, Luandlunkulu, Boom Shaga, Amos, Naked DJ, and a special live performance by the internationally acclaimed Hoabili.
You can now secure your tickets from 300 Rand at computicket.co.za. Don't miss your chance to be part of this unforgettable celebration. 27th April at Mbombela Stadium, Mpumalanga. #MMA24. Black to the future. Metro FM. It's where you want to be.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
We'll have an update on the Senzo Mayiwa trial pretty shortly. We'll also have an update on the NPA effectively getting involved in some sort of bargaining with companies that fall foul of certain issues. That's an important one coming up just now. But let's talk about South Africa, 30 years of freedom. However, there are question marks. Okay, Genevieve Quintal is with me, spokesperson for Amnesty International South Africa. Appreciate your time, Genevieve. You're on the National Pulse. Hi.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Now, see, the premise of our conversation is your organization's position that 30 years after the end of apartheid in this country, the right to live in dignity continues to be trampled on. It seems like it's a really obvious thing, and yet it's not something we tend to measure every single day, do we?
Absolutely. Like you said, it's nothing new we're saying, really. I think it's just really a stark reminder, and, we will be celebrating 30 years since the end of apartheid, since freedom in this country. And while a lot has improved over the last 3 decades, we're not saying everything is bad. There's still a lot to be desired to. There's still a lot of issues. It's the things we talk about every day. Gender-based violence, the rampant rate that this remains, very high rates of this. Issues with education. I mean, we've been talking about pit latrines. We saw just this week or on Friday, a 3-year-old child drowning in a pit latrine in the Eastern Cape. Literacy levels, the state of our healthcare and accessibility to healthcare in this country. Water. I could go on, Ashraf. I mean, we can talk about crime levels. It's these things, and it's basic right to life, right to water, right to health. All those things. A lot of people don't have access to those rights, to those basic rights 30 years into our freedom.
Well, I mean, if we put it another way to say, all of us, young and old, there may be 10 fundamental things that we need to be able to, express ourselves fully and to maximize our fullest potential within our choices. But there are 10 things outside of within our control that we can't govern. And am I correct in saying that, even if I did it very loosely, there's a good chance that maybe 8 out of those 10 issues we fall foul as a country?
Absolutely. We've been speaking about it quite a bit now in the run-up to elections. So a lot of these issues are raised in Amnesty's annual human rights report that was released today, and that looks at the human rights situation in 155 countries, which includes South Africa. But also in the run-up to elections, we've done an elections manifesto. We've looked at 10 issues that really are at the heart of some of the failures in this country. And again, like you said, it's fundamental stuff: water, health, GBV, and just crime in general. A big one for Ashraf, and I think, we look at how people really gave up their lives to fight for the freedom of this country. And we still have people fighting for the rights for themselves, for their communities, for their families, who are dying for fighting for those rights. Human rights defenders who to this day are being gunned down for fighting for basic rights.
So who do we point fingers at? Is it the ruling party? Is it business? Is it civil society? Is it communities, civic organizations? Are they churches and mosques and synagogues and mandirs? Is there an absence of morality? What I'm trying to say is it all those things? Because if there's so much wrong, it can't just be pointed to the fingers of one organization, can it?
No, absolutely not. And I think everyone has their part to play. But a lot of these things, in terms of access to water, access to health, are an obligation that lie on the state. Security, so a lot of it does fall at the hands of the state. South Africa's got great legislation, we've got great policies, we've got robust policies, but those are not being implemented. If you look at the state of the police service, so it's also institutions that aren't playing their part. So, yes, everyone has a part to play, but a lot of it is falling at the hands of the government as the state. The state has the obligation to provide these services to people living in South Africa. But unfortunately, a majority of it does lie at their feet. We need to look at a way that we are going to implement we've got an amazing constitution. How are we going to ensure that these things are implemented properly? And this is where accountability comes in. So I guess from both sides, we also need to ensure that we are holding our elected officials, no matter who they are, accountable. And yes, I know it sounds like we go on and talk about the same thing over and over again. But until we actually see change, this is what we have to do. We have to demand accountability.
What's the one thing in 30 seconds that Amnesty International can do that you possibly have not done in the past to not just raise the consciousness, but to activate a type of action that will at least see one or two areas of our society improving? In 30 seconds.
Oh, in 30 seconds. I guess we've just got to keep pushing. A big one for us is right to life and safety. So we're doing a big push on looking at human rights defenders and then also looking at the fight against GBV, making sure there's accountability, that the laws we have in place are being utilized, but also that we actually get legislation moving. And so we're pushing hard on that, making submissions, making sure that we get some movement on that side.
And that's where we're going to leave it. The right to life, the right to safety. Thanks for your time, Genevieve Quintal, the spokesperson for Amnesty International South Africa. In fact, the right to life is a very natural segue into the next conversation around the Senzo Meyiwa trial.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
So I understand that the Defence Counsel's Charles Manisi has been warned not to lecture Senzo Meyiwa's murder investigating officer Bato Mohola on her duties in court. What exactly does that mean? Let's find out from someone who knows more than me, for sure. Pearl Magubane, SABC's news reporter there. Pearl, hi.
Good afternoon, Ashraf, and to the listeners.
Right, explain that opening statement.
Well, basically, we got off to a rocky start with Advocate Charles Manisi saying to the investigating officer that she's here to assist the court and not here as a member of the SAPS, and therefore should be truthful in order to help the court get to the right conclusion. However, Sergeant Mohola took offense to that, saying that she knows exactly why she's in court and she knows her duties, and she's got vast experience in testifying in court, and was quite insulted by that, leading to the judge interjecting and saying that there is no need for Advocate Manisi to lecture Mohola about how to conduct herself when on the stand.
And was there a response to that?
Yes, it was simply just that ruling to say that Manisi should change his way of questioning Mohola, because it seemed as if it was an attack in the beginning, and that he should change the line of questioning. And then he quickly moved on to, the questions that he had for Mohola, that being the way they had conducted the investigation. Manisi criticized Mohola for not going to the Meyiwa family to do several interviews or to interview the family about what they know, or to inform them that they were part of the investigating team when they came on in 2018, and also criticized her for not interviewing all the witnesses inside the house. However, Mohola said she was only tasked to interview one, that being Mthokozi Sitwala, and all the other officers had their different roles, and that's why she didn't interview the rest of the witnesses in the house.
Okay. Anything else came up that you'd like to share?
Yes, just two things. The one being that Manisi has questioned Mohola about the mastermind that the police say is behind the killing, and Mohola went on to name Kelu Khumalo as the known mastermind. He then asked why she is not before the court, but Mohola said a warrant of arrest, there's an application for that, but has not been issued, and therefore that matter is subject to the NPA and the lead investigating officer, and left it at that. Just before we adjourned as well, we heard from the judge saying that one of the defense counsels, Ngomezulu, who represents accused one, this morning there were people that came to his house that appeared that they wanted to harm or kill him, and therefore did not feel safe, and has advised Ngomezulu to go to the police to get the necessary protection, as he is entitled to that. Ngomezulu suspects that these people are targeting him because he's involved in this case.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it, right? Yeah?
Yes, we'll be back tomorrow in court, and we're expecting a new witness.
And we'll talk then. Pearl Magubane, SABC News reporter, following the Senzo Meyiwa trial. Don't forget the NPA and their thoughts around dispute resolution and big business around the NPA investigations. Looking forward to that conversation. Lots of people commenting on many issues around Afri Forum. Here's another that I think you should hear.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Speaking to Sfiso in Durban. Sometimes we have to speak reality. AfroForum is speaking reality when they say our education system is creating job sinkers rather than creating the job creations. We're struggling to get jobs in South Africa because our government does not create jobs for people. when they create a job, they just create job of 3 months, 2 days, something that never fit people and fit the South African. I'm agree with the Afro Forum for today. Thank you.
I'm agreeing with the Afri Forum for today. But what else do you agree with them or disagree? But thanks for that call. We have a diversity, people all around the country, absolutely connected, as we should be, to the national pulse. Let's get the news now. It's 4 o'clock with Iba Chipa.
Thanks, Ashraf. Top stories at 4. Limpopo Facebook rapist found guilty and senior Eastern Cape health official arrested in East London. Good afternoon. I'm Eva Chipa. A man who used Facebook to lure women and rape them has been found guilty at the High Court in Thoyando in Limpopo. Mokove Makavu lured women through Facebook under the pretext of being a prophet, and he would then rape and rob them. He's been found guilty on 6 counts, including rape, robbery and intimidation. Michael Makungo reports.
The rapist, Makavu, will be sentenced on the 3rd of June. Mitigation and aggravation of sentence will also be done before the sentencing. Makavu had created a factious Facebook account under the names of Elmam Tabatsindi, claiming to be a prophet. The account attracted over 100,000 followers. He lured women to various spots, including at the Muchundu River and the Pipiti outside Tando, where he raped them. Michael Makungo, SABC, Polokwane.
The National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batoyi, says there have been significant changes, including stabilizing the leadership of the NPA since 2021. Batoyi said this during the media roundabout table discussion held in Pretoria. She has reiterated that the NPA has increased their staff capacity and partnered with civil society as well as the private sector. She says a decade of state capture severely hampered the NPA's growth trajectory.
I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved and how far we've come since the new leadership took place. So in May 2019, when I first addressed the media, just about 3 months into my term, I then committed to dealing with the following: addressing the leadership crisis of the NPA, conducting a review of high-profile cases relating to decisions to prosecute or not to prosecute. There were certain state capture-related matters, reviewing the structure of the NPA, securing sufficient budget for the NPA and expanding its partnerships, managing cases relating to state capture.
The IFP says it's not completely closing the door to discussions on forming coalition governments with the ANC after the May 29th general elections. IFP leader Velenkosini Hlabisa was speaking on the sidelines of a multi-party charter media briefing outlining the 11 parties' plan on social relief for households living in poverty. Hlabisa said should the MPC fail to get an outright majority to govern the country, he believes a grand coalition of various small parties will be the answer. He does, however, say that the IFP could consider talks with the ANC as a last resort. In other news, a prominent senior official in the Eastern Cape Health Department has been arrested in East London on charges of forgery. He handed himself over to the Hawks in the presence of his legal representative. He is due to appear in the Zwelitsha Magistrate Court later today. And looking further afield, the President of Portugal says his country takes full responsibility for its role in transatlantic slavery. Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa suggested that there was a need for reparations to be paid. Historically, Portugal had an involvement in the slave trade, transporting about 6 million Africans across the Atlantic between the 15th and 19th centuries. The BBC's Alison Roberts reports.
In some countries that colonised others or engaged in the slave trade, the debate about reparations is well underway, but it is not far advanced in Portugal. Since he was elected in 2016, President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa has several times expressed regret for his country's role in enslaving and colonising Africans. Now he said that rather than looking to apologise for past abuses in an attempt to put them behind it, Portugal, like others, should take full responsibility for its actions. In some cases, he said it should pay the costs for wrongs done, such as when massacres took place under colonial rule or where significant items were looted and never returned.
Recapping the top story at 4, a man who used Facebook to lure women and rape them has been found guilty at the High Court in Thoyando in Limpopo. I'll be back at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Eva Chipa.
Coming up in your sports this hour, SA Rugby happy with Varsity Cup tackle change, and we hear from Mamelodi Sundowns head coach Rulani Mokoena with regards to struggles that come with coaching a top team like Mamelodi Sundowns. More details at 4:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Afternoon, starting off in Gauteng, in Sunninghill, on the N1 southbound, there's a stationary vehicle after Rivonia Road, and on the N1 southbound, a crash reported at Rivonia Road that's causing delays. In KZN, the N2 southbound is queuing towards Spaghetti Junction. The N2 northbound has a stationary vehicle just before the M41 gateway exit, and traffic lights are not working at Stapleton Road and Eden Road, causing delays. In Mpumalanga, on the R40, there's protest action north of Bushbuck Ridge, so you're asked to expect delays and diversions. In Cape Town, the M5 northbound is slow moving towards the N1 Kuburg interchange. The N2 outbound is slow moving towards Hospital Bend, and Main Road northbound is slow moving towards Clovelly. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
Stay safe on the roads. SAFM is with you.
Attention to all music lovers. The highly anticipated Metro FM Music Awards are finally here.
Yo, y'all ready?
Purchase your tickets to gain access to the awards ceremony and the live concert happening on the 27th of April 2024 at Mbombela Stadium, Mpumalanga.
Yo, we about to have some fun in here.
You can now secure your tickets from R300 at www.computicket.co.za.
Yeah, man, this is a big night.
With a star-studded lineup of DJs and live performances, don't miss your chance to be part of this unforgettable celebration of talent and music excellence.
Come on, Mbombela, come through. Let's do this.
Hashtag MMA24, Black to the Future. Metro FM, it's where you want to be.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
You say you're celebrating Unfreedom Day. Why do you call it that?
In fact, we are not celebrating, we are mourning. First and foremost, we want to acknowledge the sacrifices that were made. People lost their lives, people fought for the real freedom. But that freedom was betrayed by corrupt leaders who are only interested in enriching themselves and their families. We have seen over the years corruption robbing the poorest of the poor of basic services. And we have seen activists in our movement being killed. I mean, in the 30 years of democracy, we have seen what councillors of the ANC being involved in the assassination of our leaders. Some of them have been arrested and are serving life imprisonment. So we cannot celebrate freedom when we are living under these inhuman conditions.
Tapelo Mohapi, General Secretary of the Shack Dwellers Movement, Abahlali Basum John Dolo.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM. The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
I've had a listener speak to me and saying, Ashraf, when you call out for people to take pictures wherever they are, in the country, locked into SAFM radio, what about you getting them to literally put their hands on the pulse, on their pulses, like a picture with their one hand on the pulse or the other, and let's see who sends a picture. So let's see. If you're up for that, let me know. Hands on the pulse when you take the picture, and you can WhatsApp it right away. And tell me where you are, of course, right? Wherever in the country. WhatsApp 0614 104 107. But you can also tweet it out or post it on our Facebook pages on SAFM Radio using the hashtag The National Pulse. Any thoughts, by the way, on the conversation I had earlier on when we had That's My Point feature about public holidays as the best way to make a cause less popular, because it neutralizes that cause. And I'm suggesting that there's a greater awareness when people go to work on that day. I know it's not popular, but if you have an opinion on that, I certainly want to know. I certainly will pick up a lot of comments we've had on refugees, on affirmative action, both in WhatsApp and calls as soon as I get a chance. But let's talk now about the NPA. They've been pronouncing on a whole range of issues, the National Prosecuting Authority, and they're a very important tool, if I can say that, in implementing the rule of law that we so covet in our country, isn't it? So they, I understand, the NPA, they've spoke today about this, which is companies involved in corruption in South Africa can now opt for alternative dispute resolution with law enforcement to avoid criminal charges. What that really means, I don't know. Someone suggested, are you talking about a get out of jail card, free or at a price? Either way, we're going to find out. With Advocate Omar Rabaji Rasetama, the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions at the Asset Forfeiture Unit on the line here. Good chatting to you, Advocate Rabaji Rasetama. Thanks for joining us. You are certainly connected to the National Pulse.
Thank you very much to you and to your listeners. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So help us understand this issue about, dispute resolution and a way to agree on that versus what was the norm before when there's a dispute around issues around corruption, especially with regard to big businesses.
Thank you very much for that question. First, as South Africa were a signatory to your Vienna Convention, to UNCAC, to fighting corruption, to UNODC, OCDE, in terms of adopting what we call non-trial resolution, right? So when you're faced with grand-scale corruption like we did, and so has many other countries, you need to have a toolkit, mechanisms within which to fight illicit financial flows and or corruption and or bribes. So it's an international obligation. So legally, we need to have a mechanism in terms of how quickly can we fight corruption. What does it entail? A company comes forward, self-report to NPA and says, look, I have discovered that my employees, let's take the case of SAP Global, which is a software company, the headquarters in Germany, which we did an ADRM with in January. They did an investigation and came forward to NPA and said, we've just had our employees were involved with grand-scale corruption. They paid bribes to get government contracts. So we're here to self-report. We've put in a compliance program. We've gotten rid of all those employees, and therefore we are disgorging. We're paying back the money from the tainted contract, but not only that, we are paying a penalty. So it's increased accountability. But not only do they do this, what they also do is they hand over all the evidence that they have gathered in the course of their investigation so that we can prosecute wrongdoers.
So are you saying at its core, when a company organization is guilty of corruption, that you would effectively make a deal with them where they would hand over all the evidence, then they would pay you a fine and other punitive measures, but that will allow you to receive all the evidence to maybe have further prosecutions, I don't know, but the very important one here is none of the key decision makers within that organization that committed corruption will actually go to jail.
So first, they don't pay NPA. They don't pay us. The money is paid into a criminal asset recovery account, which is held in Treasury. So no money gets paid to NPA. And then so it's all about increasing accountability. It's all about transparency. It's all about public-private partnership in terms of fighting crime.
Okay, we get that, but the number of the question is, it is an alternative to prevent them from going to prison, right?
So, let me quote Stephen van Coller, one of our CEOs in our corporate. You might have seen his interview, I think it was on Sunday Times 3 weeks ago, where he said, companies are not corrupt. It's the individuals. It's people in the company that are corrupt. So, what is the company? It's an entity. It's got assets and liabilities. It's got people in it, and it's the people that have committed wrong and they are going to be prosecuted. So let's call it fast-track mechanism to prosecution, because you've got somebody who's done wrong saying, look, this is what I found in my company.
So you call it fast-track prosecution. Would that person, so to just pick up on what you said, would the company and the company brand name, would the company be convicted? Would the person be convicted? Would nobody be convicted?
It will be the actual wrongdoer, the person. It will be the person convicted. The company acknowledges wrong on behalf of the entity and pay the tainted contract back to whatever organization that is. In this case, there was DWS, there was Transnet, there was Eskom, there was PRASA. They pay back the money back to that organization, and then the penalty part of it goes to the criminal asset recovery account held in Treasury.
I mean, understand. Look, I've certainly heard about, bargains being made in court, outside of court, on a whole range of issues, right? Not just now. But do I get that this position that you've taken now, is this a new position in dealing with corruption for big business? And if it's a new position, then what was the existing position up to now?
So the existing position is that you would have, you would charge the company A, Pty Limited, as let's say one of the accused before court, and you will charge the wrongdoers. Now, what you're going to end up with is the people doing jail time and a small little slip, a small fine. So it's always existed. Now, I think we are improving. We're improving on that position because now there's reparation, a penalty that's been paid. It's a step up. It's an improvement on what has always existed in law.
Okay. Now, we know that corruption, especially grand corruption, is such a big issue. It's brought this country to its knees, and therefore it's impacted on every one of us, right? Isn't the alternative that this person who's acting as the leader of the company, so effectively on behalf of the company, but I understand in terms of law you charge the person, why would a get-out-of-jail card, not for free, at a price, be a greater deterrent than actually prison time?
Prison time is going to happen depending on the sentence that's meted out. Obviously, it will be done by the judiciary, so it is going to happen. But why would you, except for prison time for the individuals, the accused persons before court, you can't set the entire company. The company is an entity. It consists of assets and liabilities and people. So it's better to get disgorgement from the company. Let them pay back the tainted money or the contract price. And then get the actual individuals. Because remember, you must prove beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. A did the following.
So you're saying once you get the money back, in fact, then that company does not benefit from any corrupt deals, and therefore their so-called benefit falls away. So they've come down to where they were before, and that's what you're hoping for, right?
That's what I'm saying. And not only that, one of the conditions in our directives to prosecutors is that the company must show that they're going to come up with a very strict compliance program to prevent corruption from happening again.
I take it you've canvassed this with prosecutors, you've canvassed this with other legal experts in the legal fraternity, human rights issues, and you've got support from them or not?
We've got, as I've said, this is part of international obligations. So as a country, we must be part of the growing legal reform internationally, yes. And then we were supported by the University of Cape Town. We had researchers from the University of Anti-Corruption in Vienna. Today we presented to the media. We presented about this to Parliament. We've also discussed this with the prosecutors countrywide in the organization, and yes, the minister is aware of it, and that's how we're proceeding. And the president, of course, who we give a report quarterly on how we're fighting.
Now, finally, as we talk, I'm accepting or expecting some members of our nationwide audience to be rather skeptical about what they've just heard. How would you allay their fears in 30 seconds to say, actually, this position, this bargain around dispute resolution, the agreement is the way to go? What would you tell them? You've got 30 seconds.
I'll tell them that South Africa, in fact, has been lagging behind in terms of how we've been fighting corruption. So we've caught up with the rest of the world. I mean, the USA did their first non-trial resolution or corporate ADRM in 2008 with Germany in the Siemens case. So we have been lagging behind as far as international mechanisms of fighting crime and corruption are concerned. Okay. That's number one. Number two, there's a criteria. So there are 10 things we look at. We look at the pervasiveness of the crime in that company. We look at whether they're a serial offender. We look at whether if you really say you want to close down this company, what about the employment of people? So you take into account public interest. So it's a balancing act. That's why it's a public-private partnership, but as I've said, the actual wrongdoers are going to be prosecuted.
Well, this is a fascinating discussion, something worthy of a fireside chat over the weekend, I'm sure. Thank you for your time, Advocate Omar Rabaji Rasetama, the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecution's Asset Forfeiture Unit, talking about this new way of doing things, about companies involved in corruption now opting for alternative dispute resolution with law enforcement to avoid criminal charges, as per the conversation with the NPA. We're going to talk about the poor in South Africa and what to do about the poor, jobs, basic income grants. What more can we do to alleviate their plight in a moment?
Any person aggrieved by any political advertisement or political election broadcast that is broadcast by SAFM may lodge a complaint within 5 days from broadcast with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA. To lodge your complaint, please contact ICASA's Compliance Department via telephone number on 012-568-3233. That's 012-568-3233. Or email broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. That's broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. Alternatively, complaintsccc@icasa.org.za. That's complaintsccc@icasa.org.za.
The Chill Zone with Bertha Charuma.
I was about to ask, is there anything like normal jealousy?
Yeah. You know what? There definitely is. I think ideally, that's actually what we would term more being territorial, or what we would term being a bit of insecurity. Jealousy is when it gets to a point where it starts being overbearing. You get to a point where you're now irrational in your thoughts and in your behaviors. So I'll give you an example. If somebody, a total stranger, takes a look at your partner as you're walking past, insecurity is you thinking, hey, what is this guy doing? And, and that's all there is to it.
Linda Yende, relationship coach.
Bertha Charuma, Fridays, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. The Chill Zone with Bertha Charuma.
I was about to ask, is there anything like normal jealousy?
Yeah. You know what? There definitely is. I think ideally, that's actually what we would term more being territorial, or what we would term being a bit of insecurity. Jealousy is when it gets to a point where it starts being overbearing. You get to a point where you're now irrational in your thoughts and in your behaviors. So I'll give you an example. If somebody, a total stranger, takes a look at your partner as you're walking past, insecurity is you thinking, hey, what is this guy doing? And, and that's all there is to it.
Linda Yende, relationship coach.
Bertha Charuma, Fridays, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.6 FM in Mthatha.
Yesterday we had a very important conversation with Youth Capital about unemployment and unemployed South African youth and what needs to happen. And I have a sense that conversation we've had like 20 like that, on different platforms, and that needle just does not shift. So that's ongoing. You may well ask the question: what do any of the political parties say about that? Is there an urgent attention fix the way we address the urgent threat of COVID-19 when it surfaced on our shores a few years ago? So while we think about that part, I then pick up a tweet that I thought very interesting coming from Neil Coleman from the Institute for Economic Justice. Again, as different parties put their positions forward, Neil Coleman suggested, but look, let's talk about the basic income grant, because he's suggesting that half the people in South Africa live in poverty and around 16 million don't have sufficient income to buy food. So why do we... Well, he's talking about one party, but it could apply to all parties. Why do we not support the basic income grant? So let's find out more about it with Neil Coleman. Neil, appreciate your time. You're now on the National Pulse.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Good to be here.
Thank you. Of course, now you're the senior policy specialist at the IEJ. And so, what is your position, firstly, on the broader issue of dealing with poverty? And then we look at specifically the basic income grant and your position there.
Yeah. Sure. Firstly, I think it's encouraging that the issue of basic income is a live debate in these elections. An encouraging number of parties are actually embracing basic income, and as the Basic Income Coalition, we've engaged with them and asked them for their views, and are going to be publishing a report in the next couple of weeks on what their positions are. But as you said, in a situation of extreme poverty and widespread hunger in the country, there's no ways in which the electorate or young people or the people in South Africa in general can accept a situation where parties are promising in 5 to 10 years' time there's going to be a few 100,000 or even a couple of million jobs. The needs are immediate. The needs are now, and we need urgent measures which can intervene and change people's lives in the short term, as well as more long-term systemic changes, restructuring of our economy, diversification, etc. All of this has to go hand in hand. And the beauty of a basic income is that it gets immediately into the hands of every individual, every household, every community, and can do a lot to stimulate economic activity, can help those youth that you were talking about to begin to look for and find jobs, can help the informal traders, and so on and so forth. And what we've done as the IEJ is we did a visualizing exercise where we imagined what would South Africa look like in 2026 if we had introduced a basic income grant. And we spoke about three sort of people in our communities: a young work seeker, a mother, and an informal trader. And what this video shows is how having a regular guaranteed income in their hands every month changes the lives of those individuals and their communities, because suddenly in depressed communities where there's very little circulation of income, you have millions of people receiving that guaranteed income. You also have, young people being able to enter into the job market. You have mothers who don't just have to rely on the child support grant, which is not enough to feed their families. So, based on that, the international experience and the evidence that we have studied, we have seen that it has both short-term and longer-term benefits to society.
Okay, so two questions very quickly as we all to news time now. So your understanding of the basic income grant, I mean, in a simple one-liner, what is the basic income grant? Sure. What sort of value would you attach to it in rand terms? Who would be eligible for it, and how do you think it'll change society? Those are 4 quick questions. You probably got a minute rather, as opposed to an hour to answer that.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Ashraf. So the Basic Income Coalition has set out certain principles, and that is that a basic income must go to everybody. Everybody must be entitled to it. It must be at least at the level of the food poverty line, so people can afford food. It must go to every individual, not to a family or a household. Our preference is that it's universal, so that people are not discriminated against on the basis that they don't meet some poverty criteria or other, as we've seen with the SRD grant, that ends up in millions of people being excluded. So the idea is to make it simple, to get it to everybody, and that this becomes part of our culture of human rights.
And what would it be worth in today's term, in rand terms, approximately?
So we talked here about the food poverty line is 760 rand a month currently, which is going to be revisited by Stats SA. But that's the current value. And the idea is to start off at the food poverty line of 760 a month, and then progressively improve that to the upper bound poverty line over a period of years.
Okay,
I'm going to a number of proposals as to how that can be done.
All right, let's end with this, and we've got 30 seconds. I'm going to choose my words carefully. Does government have an appetite for it? Yes or no?
Yes. The governing party, the ANC, has resolved to introduce a basic income, but we have a contestation within government. Treasury is against it. The presidency says they're in favour of it, and the Department of Social Development. So with the new government, we're going to have to see whether they are prepared to put their money where their mouths are on the issue of basic income.
You see, there you are. Appetite, money, mouth. The link is so obvious. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. And I'm sure we'll have further chats around this all-important issue in the build-up to the elections and beyond that. Neil Coleman from the Institute of Economic Justice. Your thoughts on that, the basic income grant? Let me know right away. Let's get the news headlines now. It's just gone 4:30 with Eva.
Thanks, Ashraf. In your 4:30 headlines, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batoyi, says they have arrested over 700 government officials for corruption and other crimes in the last 5 years. They include the former Secretary General of the ruling party, Ace Magashule, and former President Jacob Zuma, as well as CEOs from the private sector. In other news, data released by Stats SA show SA businesses are indicating signs of recovery amid the country's economic challenges. According to Stats SA, liquidation cases have fallen by 30 to 138 in March. And lastly, the President of Portugal says his country takes full responsibility for its role in transatlantic slavery. Greg House will be back at the top of the hour with the full news bulletin. For SFM News, good afternoon. I'm Eva Chipa.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the R21 has full closure of the highway between Nelma Piers Drive and Olifantsfontein Road on Saturday from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. and Sunday from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. Trans-Orania Road northbound in Pretoria is queuing at Vermeulen Street. In KZN, the N3 eastbound has a stationary truck just before Ashburton that has been cleared. The N3 westbound in Pietermaritzburg has roadworks, so the left lane is closed between Townhill and Hilton, causing delays. And the R620 is closed in that central Margate area due to storm damage. In the Eastern Cape, the N2 eastbound has a truck crash reported at Cotswold. The road has been closed off. The R61 also has protesting reported between Matata and Port St. John's in the vicinity of Tombo. In Mpumalanga, the R40 has protest action north of Bushbuck Ridge, so expect delays and diversions. In Cape Town, Jan Smuts Drive southbound in Athlone is queuing towards Klipfontein Road. Liesbeek Parkway is queuing in the observatory area, and the R43 is closed in that central Botrevier area, with traffic being diverted via the town centre. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Khapele.
Right, what are we leading with today?
Well, this hour, SA Rugby has praised the positive approach of referees, coaches and players in the Varsity Cup to the new tackle height laws that were introduced to the community game in South Africa this year. The new laws were approved last year to make rugby safer at school and club level. They relate to the lowering of maximum legal height at which a tackle may be made, while also removing potentially dangerous ball carrying actions and techniques. Now, the Varsity Cup was the first prominent competition in South Africa to use these laws, and according to the detailed average match data, the number of penalties for high tackles decreased from 14.5 per round to only 7.5 towards the end of the league phase of the competition. Then in football, Mamelodi Sundowns head coach Rulani Mokoena says that he doesn't feel appreciated by South Africans for the hard work that he puts in as a coach of a big club like the Brazilians. Sundowns have a bumper-to-bumper schedule, which includes Champions League, where they take on Esperance in the second leg of the CAF Champions League semi-final on Friday at Loftus. They missed out on winning the MTN 8 and Carling Knockout Cup, but they're in the semis of the Nedbank Cup and are just 6 points away from winning their 7th successive league championship.
On my demeanor, I'm tired. I must tell you, I'm very tired. I'm tired. And there's a lot going on, but no one cares. I've just got to get on with it. I have to do press conferences. Maybe I've got 6 press conferences to do every week because I play 3 games. I've got to talk to you. I've got to plan training. I've got to watch 4 or 5 games. Esperance, I had to watch 8 games of Esperance. I've got to then do corrections. And people will say, yeah, but he's talking about fatigue and being tired, the player's tired, but he's got 46 players. But there's only one head coach. And the head coach suffers with the players too. He's got work to do. He's got to suffer and analyze and check and this, and I can't. I'm allowed to. By the way, I'm human, and it's perfectly normal for someone to be tired.
So this just proves that being at the highest level, it comes with a lot of sacrifice.
Well, I'll tell you what, he says we can speak for half an hour on this issue. On the one end, we could diss him and say, you know what, you're tired, but you are the head coach. Like, what did you expect? And in fact, if Mamelodi Sundowns are winning nothing, nobody would talk to him. If they were in the lower division, he'd never do a single interview because it wouldn't just exist. So he also needs to understand the importance of interviews as a prerequisite to market their brand. It's critical, right? That's why it's compulsory that they have to do it, right? On the other hand, the mental aspect, one must also consider that, is his tiredness a plea to you and me as the audience, or in fact to his employers that, I battle. And I think increasingly so we have to understand that part.
Yeah, I think if you listen to the full clip, he basically just talks about how he feels like he's not appreciated as he would have loved to be appreciated, because every single time he makes a single mistake, everyone just literally comes on top of him. And he's just trying to highlight that, listen, this job comes with a lot. And that is just some of the things that
the day they win the league, he won't be tired.
Absolutely not. Then elsewhere, Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp admits that when he first joined the club, the Merseyside derby with Everton meant nothing to him. However, he has since learned the importance of the clash, and ahead of the Premier League fixture tonight, he knows the importance of the result, which could have a huge impact at both ends of the table. A win could see Liverpool return to the top of the Premier League, while Everton need 3 points to keep themselves away from the relegation.
So, yeah, super important for us, obviously. That's clear. I think with the last 2 results, Everton pretty much sorted it. They stay in the league, but that doesn't mean not to have us and another home game. I think on the weekend, at 3 home games in there. So the idea from their point of view is obviously to win all 3, and then it should be sorted, definitely. Yeah, and for us, it's clear. The situation is clear. Don't have to say that again and again and again. It's really important, like all the other games were as well. But yeah, we know about importance, definitely.
By the way, he's also tired. You don't have to comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then moving on to golf news, Live Golf chief Greg Norman says that he was very open-minded about the Saudi-backed circuit becoming 72-hole events to better mirror the PGA Tour, with conversations ongoing. Each stop on Live is currently a 54-hole tournament over 3 days with a shotgun start where 18 groups of 3 players tee off simultaneously in different holes with no cut. And former Masters champion John Rahm last week called for a move to the traditional 72-hole format used on the PGA Tour. In tennis, Jannik Sinner has dismissed the idea that he is the best player in the world right now, saying that he should not be compared to his fellow top 3 rivals, Novak Djokovic and the likes of Carlos Alcaraz. Alcaraz, the Italian can come within touching distance of the top-ranked Djokovic in the standings should he win in Madrid this fortnight. And he arrives in the Spanish capital high on confidence and carrying an impressive 25-2 win-loss record for the season. Rounding things off with the business of football, we look at Africa's top 5 most valuable football clubs. And starting at number 5, Zamalek from Egypt is valued at around 395 million rand. Orlando Pirates comes in at number 4, 402 million rand. At number 3, it's Pyramids from Egypt, and they're sitting at 447 million rand, while Mamelodi Sundowns are at number 2, and they are valued at 599.2 million rand. At number 1, Al Ahly from Egypt, 662.7 million rand.
And the rest of South Africa is saying,
where is
Kaizer Chiefs and where's Orlando Pirates?
Yeah, I told you. So Orlando Pirates are sitting at number 4 and Kaizer Chiefs, I think they're sitting at number 7, if I'm not wrong. So believe it or not, Orlando Pirates is more valuable than Kaizer Chiefs.
But not as valuable as Mamelodi Sundowns.
Yeah, in terms of money though.
But in terms of trophies right now as well. Because when I mentioned it the other day, when I went to Cairo in November, I promise you they could only talk about Sundowns. Like Pirates and Chiefs. Sorry, guys, they don't exist. Not at this point in time, okay? But that can change next year, you know that.
They're still big brands nonetheless. Yeah. That's it from my side for now. I'll have more in the next hour for SAFM Sport. I'm doing.
Top Sport with Michael Abramson.
Man who calls himself Vino Snap. His full name is Vincent Matlo. Just tell me about some of the highlights of your career. I mean, there must have been some really big matches that you've been privileged to attend. Just any that stand out?
One of the best events in South Africa is attending a Soweto Derby. Soweto Derby is one of the biggest benchmark in Africa. And the AFL final was also amazing.
Yes.
The emotions that came through those games. And Soweto Derby tops it all. It's every photographer's dream to be there because everything just happens in a split second.
Just your plans on potentially maybe being a photographer for big sporting events overseas one day?
One thing that I keep saying on my socials and I keep asking, I'm just asking for that 90 minutes in EPL or La Liga. The rest will be history.
Top Sport on SAFM.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, let's talk money now with Paswani Mpatlele, the Senior Portfolio Manager at Makwe Fund Managers. As always, good chatting to you. What do you want to pick up on today?
Ashraf, afternoon, and to your listeners. I want to stick to local and global developments. I mean, we're going to look at here locally. South African financial institutions have been at work. We see the South African Reserve Bank has seized assets of the late Marcus Joseph's former lover, amounting to around 60 million, as it has been proven previously that money was funneled into her account. Meanwhile, the FSCA has come out to tell banks that the reasoning behind this whole reputational risk as a reason to close down client's bank account is insufficient, and therefore full process and fair and transparency needs to take place. Well, on a global space, Ashraf, we're looking at a global market where we've seen that investors are no more protecting themselves from geopolitical tensions, and that's why we're seeing volatility has decreased. The market is trading higher for the third day, mirroring global peers. That is where positive sentiment coming from the likes of the U.S. earnings. We've seen Tesla. Elon Musk has come out and said that he will be looking into producing a cheaper EV cars, and this has boosted the stock up 12%, even though on an earnings and revenue front, things were looking bad. But beyond the earnings, investors are also focused on the upcoming US GDP number, PCE inflation number that is preferred by the Fed. Market pricing reflects September as the first cut, especially with macroeconomic conditions continuing to show that business activities in the US are slowing down. Even in Europe in recent times have slowed down. Even their business expectations are rising that interest rates should be cut. Overall, these developments have been positive. The US market is trading higher. S&P is up 0.5 and Nasdaq up 0.5. The Dow is flat. In Europe, FTSE is the only one up 0.1 while the others are flat. Locally, we are up strongly by 0.8 with industrials up 1.4, resources up 0.8 and financials up 0.2. Commodity market is still experiencing some slackness. Gold is down 0.1 at $2,320 an ounce. Platinum is at $903 an ounce. Dow down almost 2%, and Brent is down 0.7 at $88.10. And into the commodity space, the currency space, the rand remains relatively weak against major currencies. The rand against the dollar is at 19.20, rand against the euro 20.55, and rand against the pound 23.90.
Okay, well, that's all significant numbers. Anything else you want to touch on?
Well, no. Everything, no. Nothing
Not
else.
for today. Okay, we'll connect tomorrow. I'm sure about that.
Not today.
And there's another market update coming up in about an hour's time. Thanks for that. As always, Paswani Impatlele, the Senior Portfolio Manager at Makwe Fund Managers. Right, we're going to talk about the importance of your vote, particularly with regards to coalitions. I'm really interested in that. That comes up next.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Okay, we've had a spate of calls, of course, commenting about a range of issues, particularly around AfriForum's position around affirmative action, understandably so. There's also other issues around the NPA and these trade-offs with corrupt big businesses, for example, and a few other things. Some things about the public holidays that I've suggested as well. Let's get some calls, okay? Navari is with us, I think. I'm just checking if Navari's there. Navari, you there?
Yes, Ashraf, I'm here with
I thought I lost you for a moment. Okay, well, you're live on the National Pulse. Go ahead.
No, I've not been speaking to you since you came back. Welcome back to the SFM.
Well, what took you so long? I'm really disappointed in you. It's almost a month, but go ahead. Thank you very much.
I've been trying to call in, but I've been struggling. But thank you very much.
I see. Well, I'm glad you're on live now. Right, go ahead. What's your point?
Look, we were told that the AfriForum is a lobby group for different policy perspectives and issues. Mm-hmm. But what it appears to me now is that they venture into politics. So the interviewee that you just heard now, he speaks more about the ANC failures, and therefore to me is agitating for regime change. And there's only one way that he could go, is lobbying for the DA government. And I'm quite disappointed with them. And I thought they were genuinely a lobby group, but you can see that part of the thing that they do now is to play politics from time to time. Look, the aspect of affirmative action is very clear.
But okay, let me split it up. Let's talk about the lobby part because I'm really interested in that. I'm going to suggest to you, I mean, there are many lobby groups. For example, I mean, we just had the Institute for Economic Justice speaking just now, as you know, Neil Coleman, right? You know, and of course, he's critical about issues around poverty and therefore the need for basic income grants. Does that mean that they're challenging into the political spaces? The fact is, even lobby groups, by their very nature, they must comment on political issues that they feel strongly about. So AfriForum's done that, and in a different way. So has the Institute of Economic Justice. Does that make them political parties?
No, look, in more than 5 times, you had mentioned the name ANC and failure in one sentence. That is purely campaigning in the era of this campaigning period of election. You don't just do that. It's deception. So it's deception. It's purely in campaigning mode for whatever reason.
Well, I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't agree with everything that AfriForum says, but I certainly will tell you now that if you and I have to speak about 90% of the country's issues at the moment, like in rugby terms, you speak about the head coach. The head coach at the moment is the ANC. Because they're the ruling party. So isn't it understandable?
No, it might be understandable, but you see, he doesn't use a complementary and contradictory approach in his engagement. He's clearly on a failure. So I'm saying if he's indeed a genuine person, he will say, no, there has been progress in XYZ in the ruling party, but there's this a failure with 1, 2, 3. That would be what we call a very genuinely criticizing for what he believes in. But he has never said anything about that. I will tell you, as a black person, that I'm a beneficiary of black economic empowerment. I'm a beneficiary of affirmative action, and I can't agree with AfriForum when they want to reverse my gain. So you're creating a division on social cohesion. They are failing 100%. So they won't succeed on that because you need to cater for the interests of black majority. You can't advocate for minority interests and forget that the majority in South Africa are blacks. We need to be...
Well, I mean, that's our point of departure. I mean, ours, you and me versus him, to say, give us an alternative that will redress the massive imbalances of the past. But Navari, thanks for that. You've raised an issue, 2 issues, in fact, very important issues that effectively speaks to the national pulse, right? Okay, there's other comments. Here's one. Good afternoon. Instead of the basic income grant, why doesn't the government create jobs and cut many positions in government like deputy ministers and allowances of our flashing ministers? Enough money is being wasted on corrupt people. If you allow basic income grants, what now is the use of having schools and education, right? From Brian, I think the government has all these deputies because the government, because they have to look after a whole range of people. In terms of jobs, it's an interesting one. If the monies get diverted away from basic income grant into serious job growth and creation, will that work? In fact, maybe a good question. I need to get them on board as well. How impactful has been the youth employment services? Yes. I need to speak to, I think Ravi Naidu heads it up now, right? Dashmia Ismail before. I need to speak to him sometime soon. It's a very important issue. Well, maybe that's why the natural segue into our next conversation is particularly important. It's part of our Election Watch feature. And, we often talk about my vote counting, so my vote certainly counts. But what about, I've also made the point before to say, you know what, in this election, in fact, you've got 2 votes. Well, I know you got 3, but if you don't listen to what I'm saying, your 1 vote is for your party of choice, okay? But the other vote, right, would be what would the party that you choose do if they have to enter into a coalition? Do you have influence over who that party then goes into coalition with? We need to pick up on that in a moment.
Be part of the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards under the theme Celebrating 30 Years of Freedom Through Sporting Excellence, with great prizes to be won every week. All you have to do is SMS A, B, C, D or E to 32020 to vote for your favorite People's Choice Nominee of the Year. SMS is charged at R1.50. Free SMSs do not apply. The nominees are A. Eben Etzebeth, B. Garda, C. Siamtanda Siya Kolisi, D. Percy Tau, E. Kirsten Neuschafer. SMS A, B, C, D or E to 32020. Voting line closes at 9 p.m. on the 5th of May 2024. T's and C's apply. For more information, visit dsac.gov.za. Catch the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5th of May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 8 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag #IsInJaSaGame. Hashtag SASA 17th edition.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
By the way, we will have another take on that AfriForum conversation with a different person, of course, right? Coming up after 5. Do not miss that. Okay, so my vote counts. Does it count in a coalition? That's really the thrust of the conversation I should be having with Joel Bragman, who's the senior researcher at My Vote Counts. Joel, appreciate your time. You're live on the National Pulse.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Right, so I understand. I mean, your organization has put together a series of proposals, suggestions, and I suppose in comparisons, particularly around the issue of coalitions. Tell me about it.
So, just to clarify, these aren't our proposals. These are the main proposals currently circulating that have been proposed by government, political parties, academia, and civil society, I'd say, as a whole.
Okay, you've collated all of that.
Yeah, exactly. We put them together. We put our position on them, and I think our unique perspective, is that our work is really trying to center the voter, the public, in politics. And too often, politics is just left to political parties and to the political elite.
And you know what? I'm saying thank you for that because I need that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No, so as everyone knows now, we're approaching elections. The likelihood of coalitions at provincial, maybe even national level, the polls indicate that this is a very real possibility. We have more than 80 municipalities that are currently in coalition government at the moment. And they aren't, coalition government, I think, has a bit of a bad rap, a bit of a bad reputation. A lot of the problems we see in coalitions are the same problems we see in other governments run by a single party. But nevertheless, these are a series of proposals that we think some of them we're supporting, some of them we're rejecting. What our overall take is that we can't over-regulate coalition politics. We need to let our politics sort of grow and mature, and it's going to take a bit of time. But there are some laws that we can introduce to help.
Okay, but tell me more. I mean, okay, first of all, you can't over-regulate, meaning what? That come May 30th, if we have, let's say, the unthinkable, and no party is more than 50 plus 1, they're going to do something that they've never done in 6 administrations in this country, right? They're going to have to sit together and thresh out a deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, some people say, coalition politics can be beneficial to the voter, to the public, because it forces parties to move towards the middle, to compromise. So there is real potential there. One of the things that we think, around how coalitions are formed is that there are two key aspects to this. So the one is around coalition agreements. And something that My Vote Counts is really pushing hard is that before an election, I really should know the parties so I'm voting for Party A. I should know what party, who Party A is considering entering into a coalition with, and on what terms, and how they're going to share their mission and their values. Without that, it's been a massive part of the voting calculus taken away.
So let me stop you on that one. That's the one I feel most strongly about, and that's the one I've also tweeted about, to say, in fact, I have one vote, my party of choice, right? Yeah. And I know I have 3 votes, but effectively I've got one vote that I would choose, right? But if they don't get 50+1, I have no influence over what they do next. So has any party committed up to now to say, this is our line of thinking, besides those parties that are part of that multi-party coalition?
So, other than the multi-party charter, no party has said categorically that we're going to, these are parties we're considering. Some parties have said that we are not going to say before elections because it somewhat ties their hands. And to some degree, that is understandable, but we need to always recenter, the vote of the public at this. Political parties, they are there to serve the interests of the public.
And I think the most obvious one, for all of us, and I'm not asking you to comment on it because you can't comment on their policies, is the ruling party. Would they go into coalition with the EFF? Would they go into coalition with the DA? Because that would potentially give them the numbers that would allow them to stay in power in a unique power sharing, and we don't know where they stand on that issue. So that's just one point. However, you're also talking about extending the time to form a government after an election. Tell me about that.
Right. So at the moment, especially at municipal level, there's only 2 weeks after election to form a government. And what often happens is, they say, the cart sort of coming before the horse, that the governments are cobbled together very quickly without a real meeting of the minds, purely to get the 50+1. And then it's almost inevitable or more likely that these are coalitions which won't survive and need to, and fall apart. So the idea is to extend that time period, to give parties more time to flesh it out.
To how long?
I think the proposal is 30 days. But the amount of time isn't necessarily the issue. It's just extending it, not forcing it, the short 2-week period.
Because in the forcing, they are literally forced to make decisions that are sometimes poor decisions, right?
Exactly. And during those times, you just have to think about internally in the political party, are members being consulted, or is it just sort of top leadership coming together to force these parties into unison? And it really, it speaks to internal party democracy as other ramifications. It's quite important.
You also talk about insulating the public service from changes in government. Tell me about that.
So the thinking behind this is that there's too often the link between public administration and the political, the elected political leaders. When there are changes in government, it can lead to instability and service delivery issues and things not sort of running smoothly because there's too much connection and because the political elite often has influence over the public administration. So the idea is the idea is to sort of have some greater division between the two.
And up to now, I mean, has the public service been insulated when a government is formed at every election or not?
To be honest, I'm not sure if I can comment sort of substantially on that. But our assessment and what other sort of academics have been saying is that that doesn't always happen, and that is one of the reasons why when the coalition comes in, there can be service delivery issues. Because
You also comment on legal nature of councils. Tell me about that.
So there are different ways that, and this is only for at the local level. There are 3 different types of legal. There are 3 different iterations of a council, and the one that we are proposing that should be changed. So it's called the executive committee system. So under that system, the mayor is still elected by a full council, but the council elects the mayoral committee. So when a mayor is removed, the executive committee remains in place, which leads to sort of greater stability. That's the thinking around that.
Okay, we've got a minute to go. You explained your position, or My Vote Counts position, on what you support. You also have 3 things that you do not support. What are they? You've got a minute to tell me.
So the one that we are most against is the introduction of something called electoral threshold. And what this will do is that it still allows every single political party to participate in an election, but they will have to receive a much higher percentage of the vote to gain a seat. Just to put this into some perspective, the ANC and the DA speak about a 1% or 2% threshold. If there was a 1% electoral threshold in effect for the 2019 national election, instead of the 14 parties currently in Parliament, we would only have 4 or 5. It would really close out our political space, and it would be only to the benefit of the larger party.
Okay, got that. The other one, and very quickly on to news time now, is the issue of mediating disputes between parties and coalitions. Tell me about that.
So there's an idea around establishing a independent body to mediate disputes, so coalitions don't fall apart. Our thinking is that, coalition politics, the parties need to find ways of working with each other. That's the entire point of a coalition. If every time there's a dispute, they're running off to some body, it's going to lead to greater paralysis and other issues. So that's our approach. That isn't sort of preferable.
So your approach is lock them up in a room, come up with a solution, and don't hire people like Ashraf Garda to mediate, because you're saying there's a lot of opportunities for others, but in fact it's not a mature way to tackle these issues, right?
Yeah, our politics around this still does need to mature, even though we've had coalitions for the past 2 decades. The parties still, unfortunately, sometimes see it as a way to gain power, access to state, access to resources, and we really need to, as the public, civil society, the media, put pressure and change the narrative around it.
Okay, well, that's a fascinating conversation. We'll put this up as a podcast as well pretty soon. In fact, Joel Brackman, thanks for your time. Senior researcher at My Vote Counts. And I think understandable, everyone listening nationwide will be asking the most important question. Does my vote count? It's 5 o'clock, just gone 5. In fact, here's the news with Greg Coase.
Thank you, Ashraf. Hundreds of government officials arrested in a warning against defacing election posters. Good day to you. The National Director of Public Prosecution, Shamila Batoy, says they've arrested over 700 government officials for corruption and other crimes over the last 5 years. They include the former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule, former President Jacob Zuma, as well as CEOs from the private sector. Batoy says the NPA has established a partnership with law enforcement agencies to deal with the recommendations of the State Capture Commission.
In addition, they've achieved in 2023 and 2024, the SCCU achieved 329 convictions in serious and complex commercial crime cases, resulting in a conviction rate of 88.7%. The SCCU has enrolled 4 cases related to 16 cases, relating to 16 recommendations in the Zondo Commission reports.
A man who used Facebook to lure women and then raped them has been found guilty in the High Court in Thohoyandou in Limpopo. The 34-year-old self-proclaimed prophet, Nakube Makabu, lured women through Facebook under the pretext of being a prophet. He would then rape and rob them. He's been found guilty on 6 counts, including rape, robbery and intimidation. Michael Makungo reports.
The rapist, Makabu, will be sentenced on the 3rd of June. Mitigation and aggravation of sentence will also be done before the sentencing. Makabu had created a fictitious Facebook account under the names of Elmam Tabatsindi, claiming to be a prophet. The account attracted over 100,000 followers. He lured women to various spots, including at the Muchundu River and the Pipiti outside Tando, where he raped them. Michael Makungo, SABC, Polokwane.
The Supreme Court of Appeal has upheld the NPA's appeal against the judgment of the Eastern Cape High Court, which set aside the rape conviction and sentence of Lisa Tkoko for the rape of his then partner. The Supreme Court has set aside his acquittal, reinstated the conviction, and remitted the question of sentence back to the High Court for determination. Kani Mapanga reports.
The appeal succeeded in the High Court, where acting Judge Tembega Tobi, with Judge Nyameko Kamana concurring, found that the state had failed to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Tkoko acted intentionally and knowing that there was no consent. This sparked outrage as it raised questions about the nature of consent. The SCA noted that if the conclusion of the High Court were to prevail, leading to a dismissal of this appeal, this would not only be a perverse incentive to unscrupulous persons taking advantage of their victims, but it would also have the effect of frustrating the speedy realization of the constitutional objective of gender equality. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
In election news, defacing or illegally removing election posters is a criminal offence, and the IEC in the Western Cape has encouraged people to report any such incidents. Posters have been tampered with in certain parts of Cape Town. South Africans go to the polls on May 29th. The IEC's Michael Hendricks.
Posters as part of campaigning during elections, and that is why our legislation ensures that it's a criminal offence for any person to deface or unlawfully remove the poster of any political party during this period of time, because I think also it's just goes against the environment that's conducive to political campaigning. So as the IEC, we call on everybody, not only political party supporters, but everybody, leave the posters up where they belong. It's a criminal offence. If you see somebody doing something wrong, like with anything else, go and report it to the police station. I think they're the ones that have the authority to investigate these particular cases. And like you said, it can be anybody.
The President of Portugal says his country takes full responsibility for its role in transatlantic slavery. Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa suggested there was a need for reparations to be paid. The BBC's Alison Roberts has the story.
In some countries that colonised others or engaged in the slave trade, the debate about reparations is well underway, but it is not far advanced in Portugal. Since he was elected in 2016, President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa has several times expressed regret for his country's role in enslaving and colonising Africans. Now he said that rather than looking to apologise for past abuses in an attempt to put them behind it, Portugal, like others, should take full responsibility for its actions. In some cases, he said it should pay the costs for wrongs done, such as when massacres took place under colonial rule or where significant items were looted and never returned.
The top story, the National Director of Public Prosecutions says they've arrested over 700 government officials for corruption and other crimes over the last 5 years. That's SAFM News. I'm Greg Close.
Coming up in your sports this hour, Nadal uncertain over Roland Garros appearance and SA Rugby happy with Varsity Cup tackle change. I'll have more details at 5:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N12 westbound in Alberton has a stationary vehicle before the R59 Reading interchange. The N1 southbound in Four Ways is slow moving towards Winnie Mandela Drive exit. The N12 eastbound in Bedford View has a stationary vehicle after Giluli's interchange, and Paul Kruger Street northbound in Pretoria is queuing through the Capital Park area. In KZN, the M7 westbound is slow moving at Bel Air Road. The N3 outbound is queuing as you approach Spaghetti Junction. The N3 in both ways has roadworks with traffic restrictions in that Cliffdale area, and the N3 eastbound has a crash and breakdown after the Ashburton exit causing delays. In Cape Town, the R300 southbound is queuing towards Port Laray Road. The M5 southbound is slow moving towards Crumbum Road. The M3 southbound is queuing towards Rhodes Drive, and the N2 outbound is queuing towards Hospital Bend. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
Stay safe on the roads. SAFM is with you.
Mama Kiti, I heard Rand Water talking on the radio about how dangerous it is for people to encroach on their pipeline servitude.
Yes, those high-pressure Rand Water pipelines are under the ground distributing megalitres of water. When people build on top of the pipeline, Rand Water is unable to conduct maintenance on the pipeline, which has a negative impact on water provision. Pipelines can burst without warning. People could get seriously injured or worse.
Yes, people can die from a bursting pipe. That is why people need to understand that Rand Water servitude is where a Rand Water pipeline is located. If we build our houses or businesses on a Rand Water servitude, then we are encroaching on that servitude. They say if communities want to know whether they've encroached over servitudes, they should look for the Rand Water beacons.
The beacons indicate the presence of Rand Water pipelines under the ground. They're rectangular, made of concrete, are painted either white or blue, and have the Rand Water logo on them.
Let's take a walk around our area to see if there are any Rand Water beacons so that we can also tell the neighbors.
Rand Water, celebrating 120 years of existence and still finding new ways to provide clean, portable bulk water.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
We've had such a conversation around affirmative action and AfriForum's latest position in terms of submissions made for compensation to the Department of Employment and Labour, right? So we're going to have another take on this, and that's what we're going to focus on as our top story in the third hour of the show. We have other issues, again, around elections and the role that Google is playing in supporting election integrity in our country. Do not miss that conversation. Certainly looking forward to it. And there's an update on from the South African Federation of Trade Unions later on about a conversation earlier on about government to penalise employers who do not comply with regulations when it comes to paying the required pension fund. Do not miss that issue. Right, so earlier on we spoke to AfriForum about their submissions to the Department of Employment and Labour regarding draft regulations on race issues, of course. And I think it's common knowledge AfriForum's position with regards to affirmative action. Having said that, they have an opportunity to submit in these submissions, and for them, obviously, to shift the needle if the Department of Employment and Labour are convinced by their position, right? So I chatted to Ernst van Zyl earlier on, right? But before I get to him, let's bring in Duma Kubule, who's an independent labour analyst and economist. Duma, I appreciate your time. You're live on the National Pulse.
Thank you so much for the invite. Yeah,
much appreciated. Right, let me then say this. I chatted to Ernst van Zyl from AfriForum earlier on, right? And I started, among many conversations, by asking him about his understanding and interpretation of affirmative action.
Right. So South Africa has had racially discriminatory policies for decades now. You put that into the introduction correctly to this segment, and these sectoral targets where there's racial targets for employment sectors is just another symptom of it, or a version of it. And in this regard, this is pretty much just an example of racial bean counting, where a sector has to hire a certain amount of every race to be demographically representative. But as you said earlier correctly, this is not something new. This has been going on for decades in South Africa, and these types of policies might have names that sound very noble and name like affirmative action or redress, but they are not achieving what they set out to achieve. They pretty much just create a small elite that benefit from these types of policies, basically cronyism, and the people that suffer in the end are the vast majority of people that are left out of, that are not part of this exclusive club. And at the same time, it also completely harms South Africa's credentials as calling itself a non-racial society or a non-racial country, seeing as you can't call yourself a non-racial society if you have this type of racially discriminatory policies. One of the examples, maybe just to, again, as you said, to unpack it for the audience, is where we heard from Dis-Chem a few years ago, where they said they're putting a moratorium on the hiring or promotion of white South Africans. And that's just an example of the unjustifiable outcomes that sprout from these types of racially discriminatory policies. And AfriForum says it's high time that these policies are given a deadline, where after that deadline is reached, they are phased out.
Okay, let me ask you this. I mean, first of all, in terms of you quoting the introduction, I certainly didn't necessarily say that I agree that the policies are racially discriminatory. In fact, I quoted AfriForum's position, which is what you believe, right? But you've explained why. My question then is, you call it racial discrimination. Many people, and certainly people with strong human rights policies and activism, they call this a levelling off of discrimination, which took place before. And if it's 30 years and beyond, it's really because it's taken that long to try and achieve a levelling off. I mean, does that not make sense to you?
I think what we are dealing with here is the question of means versus ends. So on the one side, people can say, well, this is what these policies are trying to achieve. That is the ends. But on the other side, there is, what are these policies, the means? What means are going to be used to achieve these ends or to achieve these objectives? Now, the objectives may be described as affirmative action or redress of the past, but the means, what is being used to get to these outcomes is racial discrimination. Now, there is a debate regarding whether this is justifiable or not. AfriForum says it's not.
Okay, there's so much more that we had in that conversation. That the full podcast you can listen to it. We've posted it on the SFM radio, on our Twitter or X account. The same with our Facebook account, as well as on YouTube. So you have many ways of checking that out. But I thought let's get another view on that one. So as you've heard, Duma Gulbule is with us. Duma, appreciate your time. I mean, just your quick thoughts, and I understand you've heard a snippet of that conversation in terms of the AfriForum position on affirmative action.
I totally disagree with everything that AfriForum is saying. Now, first of all, I just have to explain some context. We have the Employment Equity Act of 1998. Every year for the past 26 years, you have a different Minister of Labour talking about, he or she talking about how little progress we've made in terms of achieving employment equity. So now I'd always do an analysis of the actual statistics. From 2009 to 2022, we've had almost no movement in terms of the employment of black people at top, senior, and middle management. I'll just do a snippet for time reasons. African people, 2009, in top management in the private sector, 12.5%. 13 years later, 13.8%. White and foreign, 70%, almost 70%. So black African women as well, they are totally marginalized in terms of African women, 3.8% and 4.6%. So what I'm saying is that we are not dealing with we're dealing with racism in these companies, and I believe that the targets that AfriForum is talking about, that the minister set, the sectoral targets, I think they're too tame. I think the time that we should do is quotas that must apply across the economy. I've been having this debate for years with the Black Management Forum leadership and say, I don't agree with this process. I think these sectoral targets are too tame, they're too low, and now there is no skill shortage in terms of appointing black people into top management positions or senior management positions. I think the time has come for us to do what Norway did some years ago when the conservative minister in Norway decided they'd had enough of companies coming up with the excuse why they couldn't hire women on company boards. And they just set a target for 40% that had to be achieved, I think, in 3 years. If you didn't achieve it, your company was just registered, whatever. So I think the time has come, and they did achieve it, And I just think that the time has come to start pussyfooting around these companies, because I've worked in many of these companies, and some of the lame excuses they come up with as to why they can't hire black people in top and senior and middle management completely make no sense whatsoever.
Okay, so let's start with the first things first. I mean, your point from 2009, and you're saying, 12% black moving on to like 13% a couple of years later, I mean, or even a few years more, honestly is quite ridiculous. I think that's the first thing. The second point is, if you went to Italy and you found that, 90% of the top positions or 70% of the top positions in Italy are run by, I don't know, people from Morocco, for example, you'd be furious if you were an Italian, if there's been no redress around that, for example. So I think the principle is spot on, right? But where then are we going wrong? I mean, is it, is the argument that, in fact, companies who chase profit would want to increase, are they racist because they don't want to increase the numbers of senior management, or are they wanting to do so, but the pipeline is not flowing through fast enough, which then leads to the issue, to borrow a sporting phrase, you need to get the youngsters up from the reserve team to play for the senior team. Where's the problem here? Where's the logjam?
Okay, so what I talk about in these things, one positive story in terms of transformation that I've seen is the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. They went from 20 years ago for almost no black chartered accountants. We are now sitting with a few thousand black women chartered accountants. I think it's 5,000 or 6,000 chartered accountants. I don't see these chartered accountants as financial directors of JSE-listed companies. We've got 400 JSE-listed companies. Where are these black women? Why are they not being employed? There are some who are getting employed, but what I'm trying to show is that when people talk pipeline, there is a pipeline of qualified black women and male chartered accountants that is out there that is not getting hired. So all the time I'm saying that the companies are looking to the usual suspects, the white males, not even white females, white males to occupy all these positions.
Yeah. So you would support a quota
Quota.
compared to
A
targets.
blanket
Explain the difference and what is the quota?
Okay, so the quota would be set across all sectors of the economy, because I think part of the problem in terms of the design of these empowerment policies, because I was involved in them, for example, the sector charters. Sector charters became a way to circumvent empowerment. So you had a proliferation of sector charters across the economy. And I always argued from day one that we should have one set of rules for the whole sector of the economy, because there's nothing unique in financial services or ICT that makes it more difficult for you to hire black people. I always said from the beginning that these issues are generic. The companies must comply.
Okay, give me an example. When you say one set of rules, I mean, just give me a number and so we understand how it will play out.
Example. Okay, so like now, let's take top management, what the government has opposed. 46% for financial services, 50% for transportation, it's 50% for... So what I'm trying to say, instead of setting different sector targets, you must set one for everybody. Yeah. So they've got different targets for different sectors. So I think that's not necessary. We should just set one target that's easy to monitor across all sectors of the economy. Yeah.
Okay. How... The position of AfriForum about, they suggesting that, in fact, they said the targets are not working, and they suggested a scrapping. And you may have heard, well, you probably didn't hear because we don't play the whole conversation.
Yes, the targets are not working. That's why the minister comes in July. The minister's going to come, and I don't know who's the new minister going to be. And they're complaining about the companies not achieving the targets because there are not enough sanctions for companies to achieve these targets. There's not enough incentives for companies to achieve these targets. So there must be a stick and a carrot, and there mustn't be loopholes for companies, legal loopholes.
Okay, because one of the things that I asked of AfriForum in the question was that if there's a problem with certain targets, right, and let's take your position where you want the targets accelerated, how much of it has got to do with poor leadership of the ANC, or in this case the ruling party, versus the actual implementation of the targets? Meaning that what I'm saying is, if the targets we've fallen short, is it because of the ruling party, but the policy is correct, or is it that the policy that's wrong?
Okay, it's multiple things. Number one, I think the government has really lost the fight on the whole issue of transformation across the economy. So they're apologetic about their transformation objectives. So we must move beyond being apologetic for our transformation policy. But at the same time, and I've worked in these companies, and these companies do not want to transform. They would rather pay a fine or whatever than transform the company. And it makes no sense whatsoever for the long-term, whatever, the private sector's long-term sustainability, for them not to, want to transform, as you said with the example about Italy. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, in terms of your quota drive, clearly it applies to big business, it applies to listed companies. Could that apply also to the smallest of businesses or not?
I think that you'd have to apply, no, not the smallest of businesses, you have to apply to, after, I don't know what the cut-off line is, but...
okay, but certainly not your typical family business, maybe understandable.
No.
Right.
Well,
Here's the last thing. Up to now, we've been speaking about transformation and affirmative action, in your example, mainly around business and top-level leadership. The reality for the many people listening to us, they will be talking about employment at the bottom rung of the ladder, simply getting jobs. What's your comment on that?
This is the biggest problem that we have in South Africa today. We have got the highest unemployment rate in the world. And I've been following the debates around the political parties. None of them are providing a credible path for South Africa to achieve full employment. I've done modeling in terms of what will require for us to get to full employment by the year 2035. 1.6 million jobs a year that we need to create. Let's focus on that and say, what does it take for us to create 1.6 million jobs? We need a higher GDP growth rate because there's a relationship between GDP growth and jobs. Number two, we need an industrial policy that creates incentives for labor incentive sectors, powerful incentives, not lame ones that we're seeing with the current year. And we need to expand public employment. So yes, we must transform at the top, and as you say, from the bottom, most people are not working in the country. 49% unemployment for African females. That is absolutely scandalous.
Got that. We need to have a cup of coffee. That's all I can tell you. Duma Kubule, the independent labor analyst and economist. Very important conversation that we've had. So what do you make of that? I mean, that's his point. You, as the audience, what's your point on this issue?
The University Registrar and Secretary to Convocation, Dr. Joel Baloy, cordially invites all members of the University of Venda Convocation to attend the AGM on Saturday, 11 May 2024 in Polokwane, Meropa Hotel at 10:30. The AGM will consider the Vice-Chancellor State of Campus report, the President of Convocation report, and amendments to the Constitution of the Convocation. To RSVP and confirm attendance, please visit www.univen.ac.za/announcements or contact Mr. Mashuda Ramarebo on 060-906-1902.
Right, now weeknights on S3 are about to get lit. Really, I mean lit, right? BBC Primetime will give you access to a hand-picked selection of BBC Studios, award-winning dramas, documentaries, and factual entertainment. So with titles such as Luther Critical Cheaters, Top Gear, Live at the Apollo, Louis Theroux, Forbidden America, and more, you simply do not want to miss out. Tune into S3 from the 1st of May, so that's next week, from 9 p.m. until 11 p.m. to channel the very best of British entertainment with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Tell you what, there's no way we can avoid elections. It's that important. It's a month away from now. We must talk about it. Google as well, getting in on the Election Act. They have a plan in supporting election integrity. And we're going to talk about that as part of our daily innovation and marketing features that we have on the show here, right? So with me is Abongile Mashele, who's the Senior Manager for Government Affairs and Policy at Google. Good chatting to you, Abongile. Thanks for joining us. You're live on the National Pulse.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. So I'm very interested first in the premise in supporting election integrity. How does Google do that? Do I need to Google it for an answer?
Elections integrity. Apologies, my line is not very clear. I hope you can hear me clearly. Well, if you look at the number of South Africans that we have online, about 75% of South Africans are connected online. So there's no way you can talk about integrity, electoral processes, and remove digital platforms. South Africans are engaging on digital platforms. South Africans are engaging with candidates on digital platforms. So as a technology company, it's important for us to make sure that we have the necessary safeguards that will protect the integrity of the electoral processes. So from our side as a company, that would be your Google search, that would be your YouTube, that would be your Gemini, or any platform where there is there's interactive engagements between the members of the public to ensure that at least we have mechanisms to deal with some of the harms that can emanate in electoral periods. One of those would be harmful content, such as misinformation and disinformation. I think we've seen over the years the impact that can have on any matter of public interest, particularly elections. It could be hate speech, incitement of violence, etc. So all those areas of harm, as a company, we have a social responsibility to make sure that we have mechanisms to respond to them. Now, how we do that, firstly, it's by making sure that we always surface credible information. So when you search for information on Google Search, we surface credible information that will tell you exactly what is happening if you're looking for the nearest voting station, if you are looking for procedures on how to vote. Our search engine will surface information that is linked to the IEC website, similar to YouTube as well as Gemini. And secondly, how do we safeguard our own platforms from abuse by enforcing our policies, be it our political advertising policies as well as our content moderation policies that we have across the platform. And thirdly, security, especially of political players online. They literally need to have security safeguards, understand how to safeguard their channels, their platforms, to ensure that they are not prone to attacks. So as a company, we have a strategy that looks at all those elements, and we basically are just sharing the information with members of the public. It's something that we do on a daily basis as a company, but it's just important to elevate it at this time so that people can also know if they need to report things that are happening on our platforms, where they should do that.
So, I mean, it's interesting that you've created this public interface for what is company policy, but therefore, if someone, I mean, typically, what sort of questions would people Google in terms of Google search around South Africa's election, and what are they likely to expect?
I am so sorry, Ashraf. I did not hear what.
And I know you said your line is bad. So I was saying that, in anticipation of the elections, I mean, Google would anticipate the type of questions that you expect the public to put in their Google search, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly why we have what we call an organized search results page. So we know what would be the type of questions that members of the public would be asking, not on who to vote for, we wouldn't want to get involved there, but on just the basic voter relevant information, such as where to vote, how to vote, where do you find your nearest voting station. So in preparation for that, we actually work with the IEC so that when those questions are prompted on Google search, the answers would come up on Google search, but there's also a link directly to the IEC website so that members of the public can get the most credible information as opposed to any website that an individual may have created that probably has the same information that members of the public would think is accurate, when in most instances it is not.
Well, I'm certainly going to attempt that Google search, and I'm sure many people listening will do the same. Probably the one you're not going to have an answer with is this question: how to win an election. Don't answer it. I don't think you're going to have an answer to that. But
and we've asked Gemini not to answer that question.
Well, there you are. Abongile Mashela, the Senior Manager for Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. Again, Google, your friend, that is, in the upcoming election. Let's get the news headlines now. Here's Greg.
Thank you, Ashraf. A quick look at the headlines. Figures released by Stats South Africa show that businesses are indicating signs of recovery amid economic challenges in the country. The National Director of Public Prosecution says they've arrested over 700 government officials for corruption and other crimes over the last 5 years. And the Deputy International Relations Ministers hosted the State Secretary for Foreign and Global Affairs of Spain. More on that story and other news at 6 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 southbound in central Johannesburg has heavy traffic towards Crown Interchange. The N1 southbound in Randburg has a stationary vehicle after Malibongwe Drive. The N3 southbound in Germiston is slow moving towards the M2 Geldnes Interchange. The N12 R24 westbound in Bedfordview is queuing towards Gululis Interchange. The N1 northbound in Midrand is slow moving towards New Road, and Old Johannesburg Road northbound in Centurion is queuing towards Eitzig Road. In KZN, the M7 in both ways is queuing towards Bel Air Wakesley Road Junction. The N3 outbound is queuing towards Spaghetti Junction. The M13 eastbound in Pinetown has roadworks with traffic restrictions at the N3 Paradise Valley Interchange, and the M4 has roadworks with traffic restrictions at Tongaat Beach, so expect delays. In Cape Town, the M7 Jakes Hartwell Drive southbound in Mitchells Plain is closed between Morganstair Road and Westpoort Drive. That's queuing traffic in the area. The R300 southbound in Brackenfell has a lost load incident reported before Botlaroy Road exit, so that's causing delays. The M3 Philip Gosano Drive outbound has a stationary vehicle at Hospital Bend queuing traffic, and the N1 outbound is queuing towards the M5 Koeberg interchange. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Doming Kapele.
Right, Rafael Nadal is what you want to talk about.
Go ahead. We're starting with that. He says that he's not sure if he'll be able to play at next month's French Open after pushing through the pain barrier in his comeback from injury. The 37-year-old says that he's far from being on top form and that he's only playing against American Darwin Blanche in the first round of the Madrid Open tomorrow as a personal sacrifice. He returned to competition in Brisbane in January after almost a year sidelined with the hip injury. And I must say, it's going to be very sad and a big blow if he doesn't play at the French Open, because he's got 14 French Open titles.
He owns the French Open.
Literally, King of Clay. That's why they call him King of Clay.
I'll tell you what, if he doesn't play, they should rename it, the men's title, to say, the Nadal title. Even in his absence.
Something like
that, yeah.
Then in football, the Transnet Safa School of Excellence financial difficulties have gone from bad to worse. This is after electricity was cut off yesterday, leaving 75 boys at the school in the dark and showering with cold water. SOE is reportedly owing a municipal bill of around 1.3 million rand rather. The school has been in financial trouble since Transnet announced in December 2022 that it was leaving the school due to financial constraint, and it was contributing around 20 million rand annually. So it's a developing story. We'll definitely keep you up to date with that, but it's very sad because it has produced football greats like Stephen Pienaar, Dane Clayton and Bernard Parker, among others.
But it stopped being the center of excellence for a long time. So, you mentioned three names, and we were talking off-air yesterday about, and I think you mentioned Pitso Mosimani's school, and we were talking about Farouk Khan, who was part of the Chiefs Youth Academy, who's got the Stars of Africa, and they're producing young players who are now getting into PSL teams and around the world. And how many now in recent times has the School of Excellence produced? Something's rotten there, isn't it?
We haven't really heard a lot about it, and I think it was a great idea because they trying to just get those kids that are from disadvantaged communities to actually have a professional career in football and do well at it. So
who's in charge of it? I mean, is it a SAFA project now? Forgive my naivety. I'm just interested. It always was, I think. Ken Dumitru was the first head of the School of Excellence, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's just sad.
Siya Kolisi, by the way, went from the Eastern Cape to Grey College. That's a school, not a school of excellence. And that opened the door to becoming the captain of the rugby team and World Cup winner. And so opportunities in the right places are critical. Okay, go ahead.
Well, then Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp has admitted that he first joined the club, when he first joined the club, the Merseyside derby with Everton meant nothing to him. He has since learned the importance of the clash, and ahead of the Premier League fixture tonight, that he knows the importance of the result, which could have a huge impact on both ends of the table. A win could see Liverpool return to the top of the Premier League, while Everton need 3 points to keep themselves away from the relegation zone.
So, yeah, super important for us, obviously. That's clear. I think with the last two results, Everton pretty much sorted it. They stay in the league, but that doesn't mean not to have us and another home game, I think, on the weekend. At the weekend, at three home games in there. So the idea from their point of view is obviously to win all three, and then it should be sorted, definitely. Yeah, and for us, it's clear. The situation is clear. Don't have to say that again and again and again. It's really important, like all the other games were as well. But yeah, we know about importance, definitely.
In rugby, SA Rugby has praised the positive approach of referees, coaches and players in a Varsity Cup to the new tackle height laws that were introduced in the community game in South Africa this year. The new laws were approved last year to make rugby safer at school and club level. They relate to the lowering of the maximum legal height at which a tackle may be made, while also removing potentially dangerous ball-carrying actions and techniques. Now, the Varsity Cup was the first prominent competition in South Africa to use these laws, and according to detailed average match data, the number of penalties for high tackles decreased from 14.5 per round to only 7.5 towards the end of the league phase of the competition. Then finally, legendary sprinter Usain Bolt has been named as the ambassador for the ICC Men's T20 World Cup, which will be played from the 1st of June in the USA and the West Indies, and he says that he will be supporting the West Indies, and quite delighted to be in it, or to be part of a tournament of such magnitude to be held in the United States. And
he should play. They need a fast bowler.
And he says that one of his key roles will definitely be promoting the event, and he'll also attend T20 World Cup matches in West Indies and also be part of fan engagement events promoting the sport within the United States. And we know, obviously, he really loves cricket.
I thought he loves Man United more, but let's forget about that team that loses every week. But I mean, obviously he's West Indian. I mean, he's part of the Caribbean. He needs to be supporting it, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he loves cricket too much. I'm not too sure, actually.
He does. He actually does. He loves cricket. Jamaican supporting West Indies.
Okay.
Interesting. That's it from our side. More on other sports tomorrow morning with Zai Khan. Other than that,
just as you end up and you make your prayer, because we get a response every day, but the tragedy of West Indian cricket is there was a period that they dominated world cricket, and I don't know the numbers, okay, but I think for 10, 15 years they never lost a test series. And they won the first 2 Cricket World Cups. They were that good. They were unbeatable. And that's all gone now. Real tragedy.
Absolutely. Unfortunate. Well, that's it from my side. Mudi Mugio.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Attention to all music lovers. The highly anticipated Metro FM Music Awards are finally here.
Y'all ready?
Purchase your tickets to gain access to the awards ceremony and the live concert happening on the 27th of April 2024 at Mbombela Stadium, Mpumalanga.
Yo, we about to have some fun in here.
You can now secure your tickets from 300 Rand at www.computicket.co.za.
Yeah, man, this is a big night.
With a star-studded lineup of DJs and live performances, don't miss your chance to be part of this unforgettable celebration of talent and music excellence.
Come on, Mbombela, come through. Let's do this.
Hashtag MMA24, Black to the Future. Metro FM, it's where you want to be.
It's time to commemorate Izinja's game. The ones with greatness beyond limits and boundaries. The incredible class on the field, court, ring, bench, and boardroom. This is the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards, celebrating 30 years of freedom through sporting excellence. Experience the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5 May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 8 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag Izinja's game. Hashtag SASA 17th edition. For the love of the game.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, so let's talk economics, in fact, with the team from provides the Money Web market update. As always, Jimmy Moyaha, what do you have today?
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Good afternoon to me, and good afternoon to the listeners. We're picking up on some of the conversations that have been ongoing throughout the week, one of which you had a little earlier on with the NPA. We're going to get the reaction from the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, that's OUTA, on the latest criminal proceedings adjustments or directives that they are amending. So we're going to speak to them and try and unpack from their side whether or not this is a feasible strategy and how to make sense of it. I listened into the conversation you had a little earlier on, and there were some questions I had as well around how do we hold companies accountable? How do we then enforce this beyond just enforcing it for individuals, because the companies themselves would have employed that individual as well. So we're going to be digging into that story in a bit more detail following on from your conversation. And then we've got a conversation around the pensions side of things. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the FSCA, announced that, or at a recent pensions gathering, that pension contributions were not being paid over by employers. So we're going to speak to the pension funds adjudicator around that as well. They also put out a statement around that to say that employers are supposed to pay over these contributions, and we're dealing with something to the tune of 7 billion rand of contributions that have not been paid over by employers that should have been. So we're going to dig into that and try and unpack that as well. And then we've got a conversation with Copper 360. They've put out 2 SENS announcements in 2 consecutive days. So I'm going to speak to the CEO and try and make sense of those SENS announcements. One yesterday was quite concerning around potential share price manipulation, and then today's one was rather positive around the copper concentrates being found in the Northern Cape for the first time in 21 years, or being extracted from there rather for the first time in that time. So lots to look into there, even more to unpack, because we still have our executive lounge feature today, and I'm joined in studio by this week's executive to just get a sense of what she does when she's not running a 16-year-old company. So lots to unpack on the show, lots to dig into. But before we get to that, the markets have had a slightly better day than they have had recently. Probably the best day they've had this week. And Henku Kriya has been keeping a close eye on those markets throughout the day. He joins me now to do a quick summary of what's been moving those markets throughout the day. Good afternoon, Henku. Thanks as always for keeping an eye on the markets. It looks as though we finally have some sign of reprieve, unless you're looking at the Rand, because that's back above 1920.
absolutely, Jimmy. Hi to you and Ashraf and Tumi, and good evening to all the listeners. Yes, a little bit of retrieve like you say, Jimmy, but except not really for the European stocks and the US stocks at this stage. But overall, a lot better today, like you said. The Dow Jones is trading about 0.4% down. The S&P 500 is losing 0.2%, and then the Nasdaq is unchanged at this stage, with European stocks finishing in the red, with the FTSE 100 losing 0.2%, the DAX finishing 0.4% weaker, and the CAC 40 0.3% down. But yes, then especially here by us, it was a lot better day, with the JSE's all-share index gaining 0.7% today and finishing at a higher level of 74,514 points. The industrial index gained 1.2%, the resources index was 1.4% up, and the financial index pulled a little bit back and finished 0.4% weaker. Anglo had another terrific day, finishing 3.5% stronger. Glencore gained 2.5%, Naspers 2.2% up, followed by BHP as well as Goldfields. They each gained 1.9% today, and Prosus finished the day 1.1% stronger. There were some losers and some companies that gave poorer performances during the day, like Sun International, which finished 5.5% weaker. Tsogo lost 4% today, Discovery 3.5% down, followed by Remgro as well as APSA, each losing 2.5% today. There's also Omnia and Supergroup, they each lost 1.7%. But then back to some companies that gave stronger and better performances. Shoprite gained 4.5%, Kumba 3.5% stronger, and Tungela and Goldfields each 2% better off at the end of the day. On the commodities market, the price of gold is $2,332 an ounce, silver is $27.30, platinum $908, and palladium $1,007. The price of Brent crude currently trading at $87.80 a barrel. And yes, Jimmy, unfortunately the rand lost a bit of strength as well today, now sitting at 19 Rand 21 to the US dollar, 23 Rand 90 to the pound, 20 Rand 50 to the euro, and 12 Rand 48 to the Australian dollar. And the Bitcoin is trading at $66,000, and that's 1,290,000 Rand. Jimmy, that's how the markets performed today.
Thank you very much for that update, Henku. We'll be digging into some of these market movements a little after 6 o'clock. I've got David Shapiro who's going to chat through markets with me. Always a fun conversation when he's around, and we're going to look at some of these movements and try and understand what it means for us as we start to wrap up the month of April and head into the election month that is next month. But for now, back to you, Ashraf. We'll be back a little later on.
And as you're back, I will be turning listener after 6. I can assure you of that. Thank you very much for that, right? In fact, we've got an interesting one. Sam saying, correction, Siya Kolisi went to Grey High School in Gqeberha, not Grey College. That's from Sam, a fellow proud product of Gqeberha. Okay, if I got that wrong, but I think I got the essence right, and I think you'd appreciate that. But certainly nothing wrong with you sticking up for the Eastern Cape. Absolutely.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Getting more money into your pockets has never been this simple and exciting. With SABC's new Simple Watch and Win game show, you can get more Zaga in your pockets. Catch more Zaga every weekday on SABC 1 at 9 p.m. You could win your share of 50,000 Rand. All you have to do to win is give the correct answer for the day. Just dial *120 *33 to hash to register and play. The cost is R1.50 per minute. You could win big with more Zaga, only on SABC 1.
The highly anticipated Metro FM Music Awards are finally here, and the live concert happening with a star-studded lineup of DJs and live performances.
Make some beautiful noise!
On the lineup, Oscar Mbo, Oskido, Dala Tuxin, Makadzi, Lamise Hallworthy, Mtunzi, Luan Drungulu, Boom Shaga, Amos, Naked DJ, and a special live performance by the internationally acclaimed Hoa Bili.
You can now secure your tickets from 300 Rand at computicket.co.za. Don't miss your chance to be part of this unforgettable celebration. 27th April at Mbombela Stadium, Mpumalanga. #MMA24.
Black to the future. Metro FM. It's where you want to be.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
And Terence from Kakama saying, please, Ashraf, can you bring people from the pension fund on your show? There's some questions around municipalities that do not pay employee pensions to them. Okay, noted. Let's see what we can do. Let's get to some of the callers as well. I'll get a couple of voice notes too. Tsepo from Pretoria, you want to comment on state capture, yeah?
Yeah, Ashraf. Look, I just think that this lady, Shamila Batoy, is the most lucky lady. She's now 5 years. I think she's left 2 years until her term is complete. She has not prosecuted state capture. Every day we hear her on media, she's blaming. She's telling us about difficulties there. And I don't understand what's her plan. If Busi Pikolo was the NPA head, I'm telling you, a lot of politicians will be already going through the courts. Because this is the guy who has track record of prosecuting politicians without fear or favor. This lady, we can see she's afraid of ANC politicians. Because I don't understand 5 years.
But why do you say you can see she's afraid? I mean, I hear the 5 year part. How do you know she's afraid?
She's not even attempting to prosecute. She targets the easy target. You know, Makashula, she can't brag about Makashula. Makashula was not a powerful politician. Absolutely not.
Okay.
And then they cannot claim Zuma because Zuma as well, this case has been running for years. I mean, this Zuma case started even before, before Zuma became a president. So she cannot also claim that. My thing is, she needs to decide whether she want to do this prosecution business or resign. If she can't do it, she must just resign, in my view.
Okay, I think the message is loud and clear. Make sharp, get things right. Absolutely. Thank you for that one, right? And others may, again, have an opinion on the NPA. Maybe it's another conversation for tomorrow. There's just the absolute workings of the NPA. To what level do we understand it? There's been so much conversations on employment, and here's another.
Hello, Ashraf and SAFM listeners. With regards to unemployment, there's only one solution: economic growth. Unless the leaders of our country ask themselves the real hard questions that what did developed economies do to be where they are today, and take lessons from what those countries did, this economy would grow and create jobs. Now the Chinese are smart. They took lessons from developed economies like Germany, Britain and the United States, and now they have what are called industrialization subsidies that are supporting small businesses in China and growing the economy. And this is why China is now the second largest economy. Thanks. This is Lionel from Woodbank.
Lionel has spoken. That's his points. And again, as always, we're about points. You have your points. Thank you for that. Absolute growth is what we need. What about those UN refugees or the UN position on refugees to Rwanda?
Why are the UN forcing a country to take people from other countries? In fact, they're making rules that you must take those people, call them refugees. Where is the rules that they must make to the country from where these people are coming? To tell those countries, keep your people. This is not fair. This is very unfair to the other country who must now also make room and provide for these newcomers. This is not fair. What is wrong?
Okay, let's see if I can understand this right. I think you got it wrong. The UN refugee organizations are not making rules. In fact, they are opposing the UK, who's allowed refugees in, to now be sent out in exile, let's call it that, to Rwanda as part of an arrangement they made with Rwanda. There's allegations that Rwanda has been compensated financially between the UK and the Rwandans to take in all these refugees. The UN refugee organizations, in fact, are opposing that, to say that's just wrong. If the UK rather has accepted the refugees, that's where they must be. In fact, they have also queries about the human rights issues around Rwanda itself. So that's one. Here's another one on refugees.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. This is Salim. Taking the refugees from UK and putting them into Rwanda is a violation of human rights. Is actually against the international treaty. There is no regard, no respect. They're just shunting them. It shouldn't be like that. I think, it's really a terrible wrong that they're doing to people. They should regard them as human and treat them as human, and this is actually treating people as if they got no dignity.
Okay, you're a refugee and you get sent. We like you, but now move on to doing and live where we ask you to live. That, in essence, is the conversation. Let's move on now to another important issue back home. The South African Federation of Trade Unions, right? That's SAFTU. Well, they're calling on government to penalize employers who do not comply with regulations when it comes to paying the required pension fund contributions in South Africa. In fact, I would have thought that was the case anyway. Let's get the story around that one with Trevor Shaku, who's the national spokesperson for SAFTU. Trevor, good chatting to you, and you're live on the National Pulse.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us.
Thank you. Tell us more about your position.
Look, our position is that for those employers who are not adhering to the provisions of the Public Pension Act should be penalized. And there are, of course, provisions that stipulate the...
Okay, I'll tell you what, we are so struggling to hear you. I think that it seems to be like some wind coming through. So let's see if we can reconnect with you, because I certainly want to know what your opinion is. There's a couple more voice notes. In fact, text that I've got. Batoy is talking about arrests that happened during her tenure, not about when the crimes were committed from Moku, right? That I've got that one. Let's see if there's another that I can pick out. Okay, we'll get to some of the voice notes that I haven't yet played, and maybe pick out another call. In fact, are we okay with the guest? I think we're okay. Let's do take two, Trevor.
Yes, as I was explaining, I was saying that the Federation has taken a position to call for government to penalize the employers who are failing to remit the benefit deductions, especially for pensions, to the pension holders, because this creates problems for our workers when they go to claim their pensions after losing employment, or rather after retiring. They quite often meet obstacles, and those obstacles include, amongst others, the fact that they are not receiving their money in full because pension holders are saying that their companies have not been paying the deductions and the employer contribution to the pension holder.
Okay, so I'm looking at it from a company point. They have to deduct that amount, right, a percentage, and then pass it on to the pension fund. And they either hold it because they're really being unscrupulous, number one, or they're holding it because they've got their own cash flow problems, and they'll probably say, well, we'll pay it next month, for example, and hoping to make some money to do that, and they don't do that. Inevitably, they still hold on. How widespread is that? Like, I mean, give me an idea.
Yes, it's very widespread. In between July and September last year, there were about 5,324 companies which were not complying with the deduction and remittance. Now, the recent report by the Financial Sector Authority shows that there are 4,200 of these companies that are still engaging in this. Now, this is not only a matter, of course, of quantity of the companies that are involved in this contravention, but also the span. So the span of many of these companies not paying extends between 5 months to 21 years. And that's unacceptable. It can't be that a company continuously is having an unhealthy balance sheet for 21 years. This, in our view, would in fact mean that there is theft that is involved in this issue. And therefore, there ought to be even further investigation. And the investigation would not take place unless government begins to try to penalize these companies. Then we will know where these monies actually are going, because there is no way a company cannot remit pension fund contributions for 21 years. What are they doing?
Well, I'll tell you what surprises me. You see, your call, SAFTU's call, calling on government to penalize employers who do not comply, suggests that they have not penalized them up to now. And that's surprising, if that's the case.
Yes, they're not penalizing them. Because even in the statement that the Financial Sector Conduct Authority released, it is clear there that they are merely saying that the penalties that could be passed on to these companies that are contravening the provision could be a 10 million fine or a 10-year imprisonment or less, or both of these. But they are not saying, so far we have penalized this company arrested this employer and imprisoned them. So this, in our view, shows that there has not been any successful penalization of this particular company. And that's problematic because it means that our government is letting the employer to get away with murder.
So outside of obviously penalizing them, and they should, right? I'm just thinking modern technology must allow, like the moment you're a company that deducts, there must be like an automatic debit order that goes to the pension fund. Shouldn't they be implementing that? That means, it's money in, money deducted, money out immediately, like within a day.
I think quite often, and many companies across the country, that's what they would do. But of course, there would be those which are doing it manually. And they are doing it manually so that they can, on a particular month or 2 or 3 months, miss that particular, whether they are having problems in terms of their cash flow problems, they are doing it manually so that they can be able to skip some of the months for their own convenience. But even if that is the case, we are saying you are obliged to ensure that this money is paid to the pension fund holders. You can't have a situation where these people, even if they are doing it manually, they think that they should not go ahead and remit the money. In our view, government ought to step in and ensure that they do that. And you see, when people realize that there is lawlessness, even in holding companies accountable, that's where many other companies will start not paying. But of course, this name and shaming, which is done through the FSCA, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, by publishing the list of these companies, seems to be a little bit working, because if you see the list really has declined from 5,300 to 4,200.
Well, something's working, and that's where we're going to leave it. Trevor Shaku, the national spokesperson for the South African Federation of Trade Unions. What do you make of that? Our time is up for today. Just a thank you to you, the listener, you part of the audience on different platforms. Thank you for listening in wherever you are. It's really a great privilege to be able to engage with you every single day on the National Pulse. And a thank you as well to the team. And it's a big team that does different things, from KG to Kamogelo to Kays to Vusani as well as Temba. All of them making up this show called the National Pulse, which means we have a date for tomorrow, isn't it? It's 6 o'clock. It's time for the news with Greg.
Thank you again, Ashraf. A drop in liquidation cases and hundreds of government officials arrested. Good evening. Figures released by Stats South Africa show businesses are indicating signs of recovery amid the country's economic challenges. According to Stats SA, liquidation cases have fallen by 30 to 138 in March. This represents a drop of 17.9% on a year-on-year basis. However, close corporations and companies have continued to close shop at a higher rate. Stats South Africa's